Neville, Tom Schulte,
Here.
Amy Carroll. Here. Todd Lavieri.
Here.
Michael Chin's absent, Chris Labrie.
Here.
Victor Alvarez.
Here.
Maria Weingarten here. Bob Hamill.
Here.
Colin Dobbin.
Here.
Our first selectman, Kevin Monahan, is here. So I will need a motion to seat Robert Hamill for Michael Chin.
Those are big shoes to fill.
So
All right, Amy moved, second, Tom,
All right.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none?
Okay.
I'd also like to welcome Anne to her really first meetings in person, right? I mean, exactly, thank you, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Thanks for all your help already. It feels like you've been here for 2 years with input and content and everything else. And so anyway, welcome
Thank you.
and appreciate all you're doing for us already.
And Josh,
And well, we will.
you mentioned
You're a veteran now. Joe.
Yeah.
he's still here.
You are Central News.
Thank you.
And a clean shaven Tiger man.
Where's
Yeah.
Where? He's there.
No.
We got.
Oh,
I love it.
Tiger.
Tiger.
Yeah. We gotta change his name. He could be a tiger and be.
It doesn't even look like a tiger.
Yeah, he does.
Wow.
Wow.
Imagine if you were here. Okay. First, let's have a motion to approve the minutes, please. Move. Tom, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. Okay, let's see. What we're gonna do tonight is we've got a regular agenda for about 30-ish minutes. And then we will, the Board of Ed, I expect Dr. Lutzy and Katrina and the rest of the team will be here 7:30-ish. Tucker? Yeah, I think 7:30 will be good. So we can have them come, no reason to wait. And then we'll have the Board of Ed update. That's it for tonight for budget items, by the way, although it's a big one, and I know that people have some questions. So yes, we will be giving them questions. I've told them to be prepared for that, and so they'll be ready to go. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, good evening, board members. I hope this is the last meeting I talk about COVID this year. But I would just quickly say, you all saw the governor's announcement yesterday by giving local control over mass in schools to parents, superintendent, or it's not clear exactly to whom the authorities given, but that's good news. I'll remind you, we did not impose a local mandate throughout the town last August, September was the first got that authority. And a lot of organizations such as YMCA were happy not to have that mandate. So our vaccination rates are so high, they're off the charts. We should support the fruits of vaccination. The boosters, we will not going to stop reporting the number of cases. Cases are modest this week. I like that word modest on Thursday, and so we're going to continue to do vaccination. Those who have been vaccinated, boosters, testing Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. PCR testing by Progressive Diagnostics, and so that will probably go for March. Hopefully, this variant. Capital projects. Normally, we're not so active with capital projects in the winter time, but if you may have noticed in the parking lot for the past couple of weeks, we've had gas installed at Eversource kind of fall. We should be turning on the dual fuel boilers here very soon. And then installing CHP, with Aegis to generate electricity and heat. That's working very well by the way of the highway Brian and the wastewater treatment plant where they're not even turning on more than CHP. So that's what I heard that so I believe it. And then they brought the line to the town hall from Park Street, so all the Elm Street buildings can be serviced by the rear. So that's gave them easement for the town park. We had a meeting with Eversource last week. They are committed to starting early, probably in March, as soon as the asphalt plant's open, to install gas in Upper Elm Street, Grove Street, Main Street, and Forest Street, at least 19 Forest Street. So all the restaurants pretty much will be connected by later this summer if they want to be. And then we're also going to connect the 20 Elm Street building we now own with Custer, because that's the dual fuel brand new boilers. installed last year, so. Eversource is also committed to bring gas into Waiting Park to Latin Center, so we can both use the boilers, gas school fuel spurs also, and also with CHP unit there, which will power not only the Latin Center, but also the water tower field lights, which are expensive to run. Then we also have, we'll be hearing more next week about the White House plan in executive session because we're still negotiating with the operator and the Waiting House proposal. They're going to see Waiting House next week.
And
As a cursor capital needs for the phase 3. So that's been a lot of work for the past 60 days to get that all done. 20 Elm closed on Friday. The investors are very happy. Happy investors. We got a $4.2 million check. Now on the first floor, they on the second floor. And superintendent will be giving notice to the current landlord and moving in the first quarter of next year. And we work with for that under renovation plans. So, sorry about the budget. I would just remind people that we sent an amended message on the budget yesterday to add two additional recommendations. So how you should be looking at it, February 7th, the summary of the budget and the 4 recommendations. We had a hearing, we had an information session on January 24th in this room on the cell tower, public safety tower, proposed 1837 Post Bridge. I expect that will go to the site of council by the end of March. Hopefully be approved by June, so we can have a permanent solution to our public safety. Sounding Lane tower is up and running. The AT&T's service should start in February, March. We ended the advisory committee on buildings infrastructure, and I really did for 3 reasons. One was the outside advisor didn't feel used. Yes, we put quite a bit of burden on Tiger, and that the reason we created that committee was that Public Works is one of the only parts of the county that doesn't have a commissioner or board to work with, and we don't recommend a commissioner or board. But on the other hand, it's helpful to have other eyes on Public Works rather than just myself. And and then finally, we achieved what was our goal was to work more closely with the board of education, capital projects, especially the energy saving projects, and largely accomplish that. 2022 will be the year of repaving downtown. I can give you more information about that, but we just received a notice yesterday from the state that they're going to pave 4 miles of Route 123, 3 miles of Route 124, which is kind of, what's the word you use? Unprecedented, had that kind of paid by the state or state roads. And finally, the police car building project. The police car building project is now a part item because you can't do everything at once with budget. And we did have a conversation. Someone in December came to us and wanted to talk about selling a building downtown, which would be a police department. We studied that and worked with the architect. It's too expensive, but reliable with economically plan. That's what they did in Newtown. They bought it. They bought it for a printing plant. They really enjoy the police department and save a lot of money with the insurance. It was already there. So,
One quick question for you on the masks. What is the assembly actually doing? Are they voting or not voting to remove the authority from the governor? And the governor made a decision,
but the governor wants to keep 11 orders in effect because
he wants flexibility.
He wants flexibility, this is fair, but he also wants to keep $3 million a year in federal funds coming to Connecticut.
How much?
I think it's 53 million.
So the legislature will not take that away from them. That authority. We don't know. No,
I think
that's what I'm thinking.
I don't think he would have announced it yesterday without knowing what Senator Moody and the guys are going to do for him. So
The House is voting on it on Thursday on something, but that bill hasn't been necessarily disclosed yet to both houses, both Democrats. But They had a hearing today. They had over 400.
And that's what I understood. It was to determine who had the authority at this point, whether it's the governor and emergency powers or the assembly and legislative powers. Isn't that the next item?
Yeah, so it looks like they want to codify the
Yeah.
11 remaining executive orders, including the one that allows the, I guess Brian would be the better talk about that, but it's the one that would allow the Department of Health to sort of issue guidelines too.
I thought the governor already has, like I do, the emergency authority in certain circumstances to simply start and then you got to report, within a couple of weeks or something to the legislative body. I think he still has that because he's done it.
400 speakers.
They only got through that, well, but maybe got through that 100.
Questions for the first selectman, Amy?
I just want to talk a little bit more about the police department. So I've been on the police department building committee, and we have been on hold for months. And I would disagree that we don't have the bandwidth to start moving on this in February, because we're just sitting and waiting for the marching orders. So there's been the town council, sense of town councils, we should keep the current location. We did an informal one here. We have the police commission. Even before the committee was carved up and it was taken away to look at the alternative options, we have looked at those. We're not finding good options. People seem to have a sense of wanting to have the police department where it is. All we need at the building committee is the go ahead to dig deeper into the options there. Because so to say that we don't have time because of the budget committee, I don't think it's fair. The building committee is different. So I would like to.
We lost our CFO in November.
I know, but that.
We had 220 Elm, which took an enormous amount of work. So I don't have bandwidth.
No, but
That's what I'm saying.
no, but the bandwidth.
Yeah. And quite honestly, if you want to make a snap judgment on something that's a very complicated proposal.
I would not say I
Yeah.
had a snap.
Yeah.
Okay, but there is a big sense in the town, I listened to the selectmen meeting today. I would say, personally, my opinion is, of the building projects we have facing us, the police department has been on hold for 5 and 6 years. I would say that's a top priority to get done. And we've been messing around with it in this period of time where we have moved more quickly, we made a decision to go where it is and figure out exactly what to do. I'm not saying, let me just finish, please. Okay. In that period of time, we've had inflation, we've had construction inflation, it's costing us money. And I just feel that it should be a priority. And my big fear is this has been kicked down the line for 6 months already now. Everything jumps ahead.
Wasn't kicked down the line, not at all.
Yes,
Not at all. We have meetings in the fall. We have one
I
month
know, but
behind.
those are the meetings.
In December, nothing happens in government,
Okay,
right? And we lost a CFO.
all right, but we
So, I
don't
mean,
need the CFO.
And the 220 Elm Street transaction wouldn't have gotten done if we were trying to release funds. So
But
I'm
the
sorry.
police department, there is a building committee on it that can take a lot of that work away. I would just say, I really think, and my big worry is all of a sudden it's March, and we push it off again, and there's some other reason. We should make a decision where to proceed with this police department. And at that point, then the building committee can dig into the various options and put it before we, so we move forward. So I think it's a priority.
Is that, we can commit to March? Is that something we should just?
That's what I said.
If we have, well.
You're gonna be
we're
free in March. You can't do it in February,
No,
right? And I couldn't do it in January.
But it's just
it's
a
coming to us
location.
in March.
All we're waiting for the location.
Yeah.
That's all we're, just a determination of location. That's what's holding us up.
Question, my first one.
Yeah.
With respect to 221 Elm, is on still three condominium units?
Two on the top and one on the bottom. We own 50% now, not 51%. We're taking the stairway out,
So that our ownership has gone from,
54 to 50.
and we have the two other partners are in, or are we still looking for a third company?
No, they're in.
They're signed up. And so are they looking for,
They have one tenant who's in for another 5 years, probably.
Yeah.
And the other tenant will be out long for that.
and so the for lease sign in front, that's to do with that property?
For that.
It's 42 million or 50%, that's in full.
42 million.
42 million.
I'm sorry.
You're gonna love it. Now we have to read those minutes.
Now we have to. No, I'm
Our cost of the first floor was under $2 million.
Yeah.
Because we contributed the land kind of thing.
Okay. So what's our total?
We got 4.2 million for the second floor,
Oh, just for the second.
and their portion
That's
of
what
it,
I'm
and they own
trying
part of the
to
land.
remember. All right.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, on to item 4. Tiger, just an update on the aquarium project. This is the approval request.
That's correct. It's just, in essence, it's, Aquarium provides 50% of the milling and paving for, projects where they install a water main. We've had this, agreement with them since, early 2000s. So we received 4 checks for 4 separate areas of work. The first one for $68,000 was for Lower Main Street. The second one was for Elm Street and Church Street, which they did this year for $62,962.66. Then they gave us $22,660.93 for Mortimer and Lockwood. And then they reimbursed us $14,300 for sidewalk repair that we had to do as part of the downtown water main project that they did this year. We pay the contractor out of our accounts. Aquarium reimburses us the monies, and then in essence, it's a special appropriation since we have to raise the value of the account by these amounts. So we have to accept the money and then accept it as a special appropriation. So instead of the paving account having $2,438,000, it would have $2,438,000 plus these amounts.
Any questions for Tiger on this? Both the receipt of the fees and then the way that it's being deposited and paid out.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Chris? Okay, so you need a motion to approve this transaction.
Please.
Okay, so motion, please. Judy, second, please. Chris? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none? Okay, thanks, Tiger.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5, we are not discussing our ARPA plan. We don't have the update tonight for that, so we're gonna have to reschedule that for another meeting in February. Okay, Josh, over to you for the financial update. Yeah, please come up. It's gonna be a little easier to see you here. And then you might as well join, just because we're going to go right to the transfers and then over to the budget review before we have the. First thing will be the year-to-date financials. which
Sure, yeah, I'm just
Everybody can read.
sharing my screen.
Oh,
Put their tablets. You want to just update us on where we are?
Sure. So, just year-to-date financials as of January 31st. Just a quick start with the revenue side. The total year-to-date revenue is at 147.3 million, which is almost 99% of the total budgeted revenue for the year, shy by just 1.9 million. The main drivers, of course, being tax collection, which is at 100.6% of budgeted for FY22. The secondary drivers, as have been for the past 7 months, is building permits and conveyance fees. Building permits are outpacing last year by 113,000, which is currently at 84% of what was budgeted for FY22. And conveyance fees are shy of last year's pace by 86,000, but still at 133% of what was budgeted for FY22. On the expense side of things, there's nothing.
Before you go
Sure.
there, I have 2 questions. One So the other items, parking, tipping, are more or less on track, right?
Yeah, the one thing with parking fees is, I think the revenue is kind of front loaded in the year, just because of the timing of when people purchase their permits. So while it is at 50%, I think that likely won't hit that 100% mark by the end of the year.
And then tipping fees, probably right on the money.
Probably, yes. Correct.
And then what are the excess cost grant?
Right, so that comes in February.
That's in February,
It comes in 2 installments, typically.
no questions there, no concerns.
Not yet unless unless the education department heard it, but typically it's the beginning of February around now, and then again, I believe it's May.
So my question then, really, the tough question is, were you forecasting how much over will be on revenues? Or can you for this group?
So I think we were kind of predicting that we would be a few million over. And instead of drawing down 5.2, which was
Right.
expected, drawing down something closer to 2 million
So
over,
maybe 3 over on the revenue.
probably.
Okay. It's hard to,
Which is kind of the 1.5% holdback.
there's that, exactly. And then everything else, thinking maybe might make up a little bit more, we will make more on our conveyance fees, but other road pricing maybe as well. Okay,
And on the underspent, have an idea.
yeah, let's go to expenses then. So 3 million to the good, again, not holding you to,
Don't-
not in a minute yet.
Yeah. Sure.
All right,
Mhm.
So the over collect was 3.
okay, good. And on expense, and
So on expenses, nothing is really out of the ordinary. We're at 50% of budgeted expenses this year, which is 2% less than where we were last year. So we are underspending by 2%, but it's not a huge amount. Sure.
we were thinking maybe underspend by $1 million was the December estimate. Still thinking that might be the case.
I think it might be. It's hard to tell exactly where we'll end up in June, where it ticks up usually, but
Well, no concerns on the overspend side. The question is,
Right.
what will we understand? Okay. Okay, any questions for Josh then on the, for where we are right now? No, okay. Let's take care of the line item transfers.
sure, I can bring that up. That one, yeah.
Are these just the 4 little?
It is, yeah, sorry.
It's total $7,000.
Yes, they're not to approve, they're just to review. Yeah.
We
Okay.
all have it on our tablet.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Josh on those 7, on those 4? Okay, then let's move on to number 8. Please just list off the ones we need to approve so that it's.
There are none, no,
They're not.
No.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know if you had more than that.
Nope.
Okay.
just those.
Okay, then let's move over to the budget. So we've had a few discussions, just trying to get a summary for everybody before we kick things off here. So Ann and Josh, it's on your tablets or printed it out. We have I think this is the most up-to-date view of where we are from the Board of Selectmen. Everybody's input's pretty much current.
Correct, yeah.
So you want to step us through this, and then I did ask for a little analysis for everybody on a few items, and we have that in the subsequent slides that we'll go through, but want to just hit the headline news?
Sure, yeah. So this is just the first slide is a quick look at the budgeted expenses for FY23. As a whole, the expense budget is 164.5 million, which represents a 6.5 increase over FY22. The town operations stands at
That's
40
budget to budget.
budget to budget, yeah. The town operations
It's
side,
really potential, sorry, to interrupt you. It could be more if we spend less this year,
it could be more,
because we'll spend less this year. so
right?
Oh,
this
the
year will
budget
go
adjustment,
down.
yeah.
The budget.
Yeah, sorry, I have to think
of-
The 6.5 could go to 7.5 or 8, right?
All right, we'll spend that,
You with me?
that last two.
It could be more if we spend less. It's a little tricky.
Correct.
That's the way Washington thinks.
You with me?
But that'll be budget to actual then, so we can
Yeah.
cross that bridge. So on the town side, it's standing at 40.5 million, which is a 4.8% increase over this year. And the Board of Ed side is currently at 100.7 million, which is an 8.6% increase over last year.
Just on that, I do want to say one thing, that on the operations, we had a liaison, several liaison meetings working with the Board of Ed directly, and the original, I believe, operation number was 86.5. We had asked that we kind of come in somewhere in the 2-something%, not the 3-something%, and this is what we come in with, which is 2.6%. So it did meet the ask that we had as a liaison working committee to come in something south of 3%, so 2.6% on operating.
So tax funded capital is down this year at 1.3 million, which is a 20% decrease from last year. And debt service is just 2.7% increase, but that's just what it is.
And Josh, the town tax for the capital, that's the proposed, the ones under 50,
Correct.
which we can revisit that if we want to make it a higher number.
We'll do that in the
Right.
last meeting. I
No,
think.
no, I get that. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's not that's the only capital. It's
No,
just the
no.
capital and
The
everything.
total is closer to
Tax
20.
supported.
Tax
Yeah.
Tax supported capital.
It's all tax supported, one way.
Let's go to the next slide.
So just over to the revenue side. Non-tax revenue is expected to be up 32% next year. The main drivers being increase in conveyance fees, along with the use of a 2.4 million in bond premium to offset the debt service interest payments in FY23. All in all, we're looking at an increase in revenues of 6.9%, and along with the currently budgeted 5 million general fund contribution, it brings us to a 147.5 million in amount to be raised by taxation, which is a 5.3 increase over this current year. With the updated grand list number from the assessor at 7.93 billion, which is an increase of 1.8% over this year. That puts us currently, as the budget stands, at 18.795 as the mill rate. And that is pretty much where we are right now.
So that's where we are, before we begin to tackle a few items. I asked for just a little bit of an, I want to go to the next few pages, and we can do these together, but maybe just to walk everybody through what the thinking was here, for those of you who have it up on the screen. So I asked if we go back to 2016, we had simply raised the amount by taxation by 2.5% a year, just a fair assessment. I looked at the other towns, looked at some of the things that they did. Some were up more, some were up less, some were, nobody was up the same amount every year, of course, but just to use an assumption. If we had increased our amount raised by taxation 2.5% in 2016, follow that gray bar all the way to 2022, FY22. It's the second to last group of bars. We would have asked for the equivalent of 18.8 million more from the taxpayers than we actually did. So if you just follow that, in 2019, you can see our amount raised by taxation was just a click over 140. I think it was 141 and change. And in 2020, it was 140. In 2022, it was 140, and in 2022 it was 140. So we literally leveled that for 4 straight years. So the effect of, had we increased it a little bit every year, what we avoided spending or asking for taxes added up to, would have been $18.8 million. That's out of the system, I'll call it forever. You know, so we bent the curve. The mill rate would have been 19.659 instead of the current 18.16. And now just using the numbers for 2023 actual budget, I should say, estimates, whatever they might be, you can see where we could shake out. We would be almost 20 of a mill rate had we, I think, increased. So anyway, all I want to say is that all the work that's been done to try to keep the amount flat has a payout over these 4 years, and it does help. So I know we have a big increase that we're staring at here. Hopefully we can chip away at it. Having said that, though, it would have been a lot worse. Maybe not been so prudent the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, no, but if you look at the rate increase in inflationary times, I mean, yeah.
For this year.
Yeah, you gotta put it in context. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's right.
and, you know, a big chunk of it is providing health
Yes, sir.
for our employees, and we had a bunch of good years.
Yep.
So we're gonna have a year that, you know, but that's our job, is to make sure we make good on that. So, you know, I mean, if you leveled it, I mean, you know, you could level the healthcare spending over many years and it would look different.
Yeah, that's right. No. Just thought it would be helpful for everybody to see. I mean, that is an interesting delta between the two. Any questions, any insights you have, or anything else you want to add to that?
No.
The next,
I have a question, Tom. If we have some cushion in the current budget, can we spend some expenditures that we were forecasting for the 2023 budget and the 2020 cycle, and then therefore with 2022 and 2023?
we can make special appropriations, but it's tricky because we don't know what we will have at the end. It gets a little tricky. We've done special appropriations, as you know, in the past for certain things that we need to have. So, I don't know if you have a thought on that, but
It is what coming up with the forecast to make sure that we have it, and then you can encumber those funds if you choose to make those, bring the projects forward. I would.
We wouldn't be refunding our general fund.
Right,
That's
right.
that's the delta.
You would lose that.
Paying back to taxpayers,
Right.
you know, with that money. So that's true.
And you would use annual expenses, should I say? So there'd be the one-off. So it's your capital funded projects or something like that. So it doesn't throw off your year-over-year operating expenses. So you'd look at the ones that are just one-off type of expenditures in the budget to do something like that.
Which your growth rate would drop.
Yep.
So it's something that we could look at the end of the month or even in April. Apparently March, we're building a police station. But in April. It's good to make that. Now you know.
That's right.
Okay.
But you know, the way I kind of look at it is like, you know, we always look at stuff like, you know, this whole year, and it's kind of arbitrary, right? But, you know, so the money kind of, you know, it's almost like we play it forward. And so it goes to the general fund, and then, you know, within the general fund, go, okay, let's pay down the taxes a little this year. I mean, the problem is you put a finite year, things don't work.
It's a good question. And so it is worth, not today, but at some point in this process, is there something we could do to smooth out next year's jump with excess monies that we have this year? So I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem considering that. So we'll see where we are. We'll card the other place. The next.
When did you make the final determination of how much we pull down from the general fund? That's completed.
After it
June.
goes back.
Yeah, so that's
After it comes
basically,
back.
so that's basically when you can, you could apply, which Victor said.
In May,
Sometime.
May, June. That's what I'm thinking. That's the
Yeah.
time frame.
Yeah.
Question?
No, we were just discussing on forecasting, and let's get that going. Brainstorming.
Okay, next. Oh, okay, so this is just simply, you've seen this graph before, fiscal year 2010, this was the Board of Ed expenses. And you can see those lines carefully. The blue lines for each year represent the expenses. Let's see.
Great.
I have a comment.
I'll
I'll hold,
That's
but
a-
I feel the same way.
Was that Michael Chen or Brendan? What is the hard line is enrollment, correct? The solid line is
Correct, yeah.
enrollment, and the dotted lines,
They're just the trend lines of.
the trends into the 5-year and the 10-year
Correct.
piece, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can look. Yeah,
And the enrollment's in 50 student increments, is that what I said?
looks like.
And these are not inflation.
No,
Right, so,
Yeah,
you know, to look at 2010 dollars the same as 2023 is.
yeah, it's not inflation adjusted at all,
Yeah, so.
and neither is the headcount.
there you go.
So, anyway, just for FYI, right, so headcount is, I would say, kind of been flat, over the last 12 years or so. You can see, in fact, the over enrollment of 10 years minus 0.1%. But it's down these last 5 years, almost 1%.
It's really two classes, so there's two major classes that are peaking.
Yeah, well, we can hear about it. We'll hear
But
that.
we will. So it's
Superintendent's
not
comments.
like across the board. Yeah.
Okay, any questions on that one? Okay. The next one is the mill rate, just again, on a graph that starts at 15 and ends at 19, it looks steeper than it really is. We've gone from 0 to 50. But it's, as you can see, really, it climbed up to 16 to 19, then we had the reval, which, as you recall, like the valuation actually of the grand list, I think went down percentage, and so that drove the mill rate back up. And now we've kind of worked it down to flattish over the last few years. And so we have a rebound next year. or the next
23.
year? Next year.
2023.
So
Yeah.
who knows what that'll end up being, but likely to be an increase. Actually, drop the mill rate. And then the last chart there is just the debt. Again, as we get going, you can see the last 2 years, this has steadily dropped from the over 120 in 2016. Of course, it was over 140 earlier in the decade or in the century. Done to under 100 million. I think the low we hit was 92 million-ish. Remember in September?
Yeah, it was just about 92,
Yeah,
93 before we
in
did the
September,
25.
and now we've added a little bit more. And of course, one of our guiding principles has been we're trying to add about what we pay off, and that keeps it relatively flat now. So, we're gonna pay down 18. We could, add 18-ish, that sort of thing. So that's just a backdrop for everybody as we get started. Any, or Josh, anything else to add?
you kind of covered it.
Yep.
You good?
Yes, I get into everything.
What's the takeaway?
Well, just that, just puts it in context to where we are. I think, we were trying to hope to keep amount raised by taxation flat for a 5th year. I don't see how we'll get there.
Yeah.
Based on some of the things we've seen and the inflation and health expense and so forth. So we'll work to do our best this year, and Anne has a few very good suggestions that we're going to put. Did you put those together in the summary?
They're in the first
So we're
selectman
gonna
summary.
work on a group of opportunities to save on the spending side over the next 3 weeks, and hopefully chip away at this increase. And if we can do that, we should be pretty chip.
You can make enough chips.
To be flat now. Well, unless you've got some ideas, I don't know.
Yeah.
I gave you my 2.
There are a few items, some very good ideas. So we're gonna gather those up, and then I think what we'll do is we'll try to work through those in the last meeting, and serve what's doable, what else did we hear, what else could we prefer. We'll talk about tax on capital. So we need everyone to be thinking about ideas.
Is debt service up just because we're gonna be raising a bunch of money for the capital? It's not, we have obviously no floating rate debt. It's just a portion of the year that we'll have more debt.
Yeah.
And is there an interest rate assumption that would use that's higher than past? Pay more.
Well, if I don't understand it, so we're locked in on the last tranche we did, the
Right,
25 million.
Is the incremental issuance this year is presumably will come at higher cost? I'm just wondering what you recall what we use for.
Oh, I
change.
don't
For
know.
future debt.
Yeah,
for
I don't
this year,
remember right
we
now.
must have an assumption that have to.
I just asked today, actually, for what we think if we did a bonding in August, or if we did a bonding early next year, what those rates might look like. But I just got that today, and I haven't opened it yet.
So we're using kind of a constant interest rate assumption. Yeah. So that number.
What are you
Well,
talking about?
That's what, yeah,
I'm just saying the debt service is growing. And why? Well, because we're gonna issue more debt than we're gonna retire this year. But I was wondering if we also accounted for interest rates. that moved up dramatically, up every day.
I think the answer is nothing that we have here, but you asked for that information.
these are locked in right now. Yeah, the rates are locked in right now,
Right,
and
but
then
the new
future
debt,
one,
yeah,
yes,
which is what's
yes.
moving already. So I'm just saying it's probably gonna increase. If we didn't increase our interest rate assumption on the new debt that we're gonna issue this year. Yeah, it's not gonna be a big number, but I'm just thinking that, just thinking that,
It changed, it will change.
At some point, when we get their observations, you're coming in and doing the same thing with your groups. It's fascinating to see how we compare.
Okay,
And I know there's something we're going to take advantage of meeting this, just in terms of how you look at that. So that's a good thing.
okay.
But it would be great when the time comes, just sort of we the greatest, we think.
It's like, now you put me on the spot,
Yeah,
right? No, it's a good exercise. No, I agree with you, because I'm seeing different things myself too that are done here that I haven't seen before too, that are actually good exercises. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be back and forth.
One very good idea that hadn't been discussed, at least in the last few years, is that, and I was actually surprised, I didn't realize our OPEB funding had gotten as high as it had gotten. Our OPEB funding is over 85%,
Yeah, about 85, yeah.
which is ridiculously high, all things considered from a benchmark standard or anything else. And so Ann asked us, well, why are we paying retirement health expenses out of your annual operating? Why wouldn't you use OPEB? And the answer is because we haven't. And that's why it's 87%.
But we were building it.
We're building it,
Yeah.
of course.
So
Yeah.
we're close,
Exactly.
but not, so it's kind of 6-1, it doesn't have, but you're right.
Well, at 87. it's
But at
not really
87,
big.
yeah.
There's $400,000 on the table of why would we use our operating expenses taxpayers when we could use a fund which we've been building so to.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
maybe, or true up the fund to 100 and then a differential.
Yeah, but nobody else.
Yeah.
We don't have to debate it today, but it was a significant.
I have to beg to differ. Wilton was 120 something.
On OPEB?
Yeah,
Really? Wow.
yeah, they were over. Pension was about 97, but they brought in a different type of funding thing. Yeah.
Exactly, so.
But your pension grew 30 million in a year.
I know.
So it's getting, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I was just suggesting that that's a very good idea. And so, but it was material, $400,000, potentially avoided, because it's real money. So you have to chip in the wet. Well, we could find another $1 million or $1.5 million, and we're a third of the way there. Yeah, that gets that's our homework assignment for the month, right? To try to figure out if there's something.
Yeah, I'm working with our actual. Sorry?
Comparison anywhere of other.
No, I can get a couple. I'll research some of the other CFOs. They're actually, a couple of them had been reaching out to me prior going, why is Wilton so overfunded for different things? Yeah, so I'll reach back the other side and ask now. Yep.
It's a slim group of people you can ask them.
I was
Nah,
gonna
yeah.
say-
Oh, yeah, no, it definitely is. I've been in ones where it was 34 million or 34% funded. They had to go back and bond 200 million. So I've seen that too.
Okay, any other questions, just as we set the stage and invite the superintendent?
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, how are we doing? It's the teacher in me. That's right. No homework.
Is Bob's grade on it?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, a little different.
Is it different than the book?
No, this is just sort of a companion. This is, I'll explain what it is. It's, no, do not throw the other one out. Here we go. Sure. We're in that kind of world now where we keep updating it online. Change the number here and it cascades all the way through. No.
We're gonna call it Dorothy's turn.
Right. Let's see. These are just the slides.
Oh, the George Bonneville.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes, that's the best page of the budget book. Oh, of course. Okay. And one more minute, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. See if that works. Okay. Okay. Good evening and thank you. Thank you for inviting us in. Thank you for beating the schedule that we had. We had heard 8:30 was the go time. So happy to be here prior to 8 o'clock. I think that's a good sign. We will certainly be going to take our time to walk through the operating the capital budget tonight. But before we begin, Ms. Parker, did you?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First, thank you. It's nice to be back in person after a couple of years of budget season. So we're glad to be here. And I'd just like to add that our Board of Education unanimously approved the budget that Dr. Letzer will be presenting shortly. And just to acknowledge this year continues to be an extraordinary time for our schools and our students. And once again, I feel like a broken record, but I can't say it enough. Our superintendent, our administration, our teachers, custodians, everyone that works in our schools continue to rise to these challenges in such a big way. And they have been so committed and focused to keeping our kids in school, even this January when we were seeing unprecedented absences, shortages, the commitment continues. And I think our budget reflects that commitment and that continued focus on excellence in our schools. I think there's some exciting things around innovation and just pushing forward academically. We continue, as you'll hear soon, about to hold top rankings on a state and national level. And our extracurricular and co-curricular activities continue to be among the broadest and the best. So we're really proud of that. And last night, our board signaled once again its strong commitment to healthier school start time implementation this next year. So you'll see that. And other than that, I wanted just to say thank you to all of you, and especially to Todd and Michael and Chris and Victor for working with us closely over this past couple of years and into this year. I know we've given a lot of thought to and had some really good productive conversations, and we look forward to that continuing. So happy to be here, and thank you all.
Thank you, Katrina. And again, thank you for the support of the Board of Education and for leading the Board of Education through arguably the most challenging time in education these past couple of years. And it's been no small feat as the chair of the board. Thank you for all that. And I know that because we're on the phone hours a day, every day. And that's what it takes. But as we'll talk about tonight a little bit, the Board of Education, the administration, the district, our focus has been on doing whatever it takes to continue to provide our students with an absolutely world-class educational program. And that's what we're proud to share with you tonight as we work through our Board of Education budget request. The request that we'll be discussing, there we go, comes about as a result of months of work and dedicated effort from many, many, many people. And it does start, leadership starts with our Board of Education at the top. As you know, we have a 9-member board. It's a 9-member volunteer board who are tireless in their efforts to support the schools, to learn about what they need to learn about, to be able to find and work their way through, find problems, work their way through to solutions on behalf of our children, our town, our staff, and everybody involved. So thank you to Katrina, Brendan as our vice chair, Dan as our secretary, and everybody who's stepped forward in really difficult times to be on the Board of Education and to help to steer the ship. Certainly the administrative team, the central office administrative team, I would argue is the best there is. Dr. Keating here to my right as our Director of Finance and Operations continues to set the bar for I think the rest of the state country in the work that we do. So Dr. Krenti is our Deputy Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, does the same as does Bill Tesber, Darlene Pianka, our Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Personnel Family Services, and our Director of Human Resources, and they're all here with me tonight in person. And we are also pleased to be able to meet in person. While you know, it's nice to have to meet with your slippers on, it's not the same as sitting in a room together and having these conversations and being able to work through things together. So thrilled to be here. You know, I've been doing this a little while. This is my 8th year coming before the Board of Finance, but it's been a couple of years since we've done it in person. So adrenaline's flowing a little bit. It's kind of nice. It's a good thing. And of course, I'd be remiss without thanking Tracy Heberman, our budget director, who is really working the numbers, crunching the numbers for us. When something changes, as we mentioned briefly, there's a change here and there in the budget as we bring it forward. It's Tracy who's working through all of the sheets, all of the pages, making sure those numbers cascade in all the right ways and that the presentations we bring to you are accurate, you know, as we go. Our principals are involved as well. You know, I want to thank them at our 5 buildings, as are our program managers, whether it's Dan Clark at facilities or Ian McHugh in our technology department, Roy Walder in transportation, who has become everybody's best friend these days as we've worked our way through school start times. It's really a team effort. And what happened, so prior to the budget coming forward in December, with our Board of Education in our budget workshop, we actually begin in late October with our meetings with staff. We're going to the different buildings. We're talking about different program areas. We're meeting with the program leaders, developing ideas and really doing it from the ground up each year. You know, that's the approach that we've always taken. It's worked well. And so we'll start meeting October, beginning of November. By the end of November, we have some directionality and ideas, and we're meeting then with each of the program managers specifically to talk about requests, you know, where they are and what their thinking is and directionality. We meet with the Board of Ed in December in a budget workshop where we bring ideas forward for discussion, and that's usually a 4 or 5 hour night as we're going through that, because in part, as we develop our budget, what's important are the quality of the ideas on behalf of children. You know, that guides our decision making and our discussions as we work our way through in that December meeting, and then we bring it forward in the first meeting in January. So this simply shows sort of where we are in the process. Next time I come here, I'll highlight the next one. But it also shows that, you know, we have scheduled into our process over 15 formal budget meetings, whether it's with the Board of Ed, with the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Town Council, parent groups, others, that we're able to talk through, you know, what the ideas are in the budget, what the drivers are, get feedback, and adjust along the way. So we're proud of the collaborative process, and we are happy to be here with you tonight as that next step in the process. So what guides our decision making, and I'm going to talk quickly, I hope you don't mind. A lot of slides, and I know you have a lot of questions. So but what guides our decision making as we're building our budget? It really starts with our 5 district goals. You know, our 5 goals have been consistent for quite some time. But what we do every year is we review and revise the objectives underneath each goal. So with the 5 large goals, it starts with student outcomes, right? Student performance, student-based outcomes. We go into communication, then teacher and professional quality instruction. And we go into school safety and school climate. And the last is a stewardship goal. So those are the overarching sort of ideas. And then underneath each of those, we operationalize them with indicators that are developed annually, reviewed by the administrative team, then reviewed by the Board of Education over a couple of meetings and discussion and revised, and then approved by the Board of Education. And then they cycle back down through the administration to the individual classrooms and teachers and areas that will be actualizing and operationalizing on those goals. So it starts sort of in the bottom, works its way up, comes back down, and then goes into practice. And using those goals as our guide helps keep us consistent in each of our steps along the way. You know, there are some districts that will create a 5-year strategic plan and action plan, put it in a great binder with lots of charts and shiny, you know, shiny cover and everything else. And they put it on the shelf, and then they look at it 4.5 years later and revise it. For us, this is a living, breathing document. It informs our action, it informs our planning, it informs our budgeting, and helps us to make sure that we're always consistent in the steps that we're taking towards improvement on behalf of our kids and our schools. So what we're doing in the process is balancing this excellence and efficiency, right? We strive for excellence. That is our standard. That is our goal. But we also need to continue to find ways to do it as efficiently as possible. And in all of it, as I mentioned before, we focus on the student experience. And it would be, I think, just a little tone deaf not to spend a moment just talking a little bit about the experience of the last 1.5 years or so, you know, through the pandemic and COVID. So just for some context again around that, we're thinking about our students, our staff, our parents, and the impact of the pandemic. And started thinking about, when was the last uninterrupted school year? We think about all of the disruptions we've experienced in school, in our personal lives, in all of what we do. And we, as you see here, our kindergartners, for instance, they've never had an uninterrupted year. Our first graders never, and even our second graders haven't. So if we look up to, say, our 12th graders, our seniors in high school this year, the last uninterrupted year they had was their 9th grade year when they were coming into high school. Right? So think of how much you grew from 9th grade to 12th grade in your own high school experience. Theirs was quite interrupted. And when we went into the pandemic, we were prepared for what we thought we'd be experiencing. And as you know, we made some very quick shifts, and with the support of the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed, the whole town council, I think we all remained very nimble in this and navigated it very, very well. At the same time, it is different, right? So they didn't have junior proms. They didn't have, senior proms. The graduations were different, other pieces like that. And those milestones and those traditions that we've had. So from the moment we closed, we knew one of our overarching goals was to maintain the connection between our students, families, and our schools. And we worked really hard to do that. We also knew that we had to do better than just creating a pale replica of what families and kids would have experienced. Say, well, we would have done it this way, but we'll just do the same thing, but in a really, a pale replica, a very watered down way, a COVID way. So we're not doing that. So we created new opportunities and experiences for kids and families. And it was a lot more work, but I think the results really just speak for themselves, which we'll be talking about. So as we went through all of last year, we took some very purposeful approaches and used strategies that we were learning about every day. And we all were, as a school district, as a community, as a state and country, learning about all of this together. So we looked at how can we adjust and modify the learning environment for our students when they're in classrooms to keep them safe, to keep our classroom doors open. What strategies should we use along the way? And we looked at the suite of mitigation strategies, which the Swiss cheese model. I know sometimes you get some of the emails that I send out. And we talked about how those mitigation strategies all work together. The quarantining, the isolations. Last year, over the course of the year, over 2,000 quarantines, over 375 positive cases. And again, most of this was pre-vaccination, right? This was going back a year ago. There was so much we didn't know about the pandemic, about the virus, about its impact. And we all just sort of came together to problem solve and to work around this. The testing events, the vaccination clinics, and really the partnership with our health department. So as a result of those efforts, our nurses, our teachers, everybody sort of pitching in together and working together to solve these problems. Proud to say last year, I think we may very well be the only school district in the state, if not beyond, that didn't close unexpectedly for a single day in any one of our schools due to COVID at all. I do. Yeah, because what we did differently is other school districts closed for contact tracing in the beginning. So if there was a positive case, they'd close their school for a day so that they could do the contact tracing. And working with our health department, our nurses, Dr. Pierce, others, we developed a plan that we're not going to close our schools for contact tracing. We'd identify as early in the morning, and we would have those students isolated and picked up, but we'd allow the schools to continue to run. And that decision made a significant difference in our ability to keep our schools open. Because we figured if we're contact tracing 30 kids, 20 kids, 15 kids, why shut it down for 1,300, right? Let's figure this out. And so, that's one of many of those kind of micro decisions you make that have a macro impact as you go through the course of the school year. And it would be impossible without everybody working together and the trust that we developed with our staff, our faculty, our parents, our community, and everybody else. And nobody liked getting contact traced, but that was the reality of the world that we're in, right? So we worked our way through it. So we brought our students back first in the fall, and we did it in a sort of a phased strategic way, right? We started at the elementary level, we started with our younger guys, and we worked our way up. At the middle school, we accelerated a little bit by grade level. And then the high school, we actually started with 12th grade and worked our way down with the whole understanding that we wanted our seniors to get as much time in the building as possible, because the year before, in the shutdown of March of 2020, they had missed out on that whole half of their junior year. So, and everything we did, we really worked hard to think it all through and to take a strategic approach. And, again, as you see, the number of days that we were fully in person, I think really stand up to probably anywhere across the country. And we even created some new things. The hybrid, the 50-50 hybrid that schools were running, where half the students would stay home and the other half come in, and then they would flip. We were doing that in the high school for a while, and we saw that it was just sort of grinding the kids down. It's the same routine, the same group, and your other friends and people are home that same time. And so we reinvented the hybrid model to be a 75% model, where 75% of the kids would come in and 25% would stay home. And every 2 days you had like a new group coming in. So over the course of 8 days, everybody got to see everybody in school for at least 2 days, right? And that kind of thinking, I think, led to great success for our kids, led to their continued engagement with this. The graduation ceremonies that we had, the graduation parades, all of that was, let's create some new things for our students to help them to sort of rise above, not be defined by this, but continue to thrive through it. So I could go on and on. I won't. I will anytime though. Feel free to call. But it really was, I think, something that all of us, certainly me as superintendent, my team, my cabinet, my administrative team, the faculty, staff, the Board of Ed, I think the whole town, all of us should be very proud of how we rose to the challenges that were put in front of us. And I think we showed what could be done. And I think we continue to do that. And it is something to be very proud of as a district. Professionally, it's the most powerful experiences that I've ever had. The communications throughout.
Less stress on the kids. We know about the stress level.
Sure.
This has to be better for the student.
We made some changes that are turning into longer term changes that I think will be, like the block schedule at the high school, right? So when we shut down in March, another thing that we did differently, again, micro decisions that make a big difference. We kept our schedule with kids. So we said, if your school day starts at 8, it's still going to start at 8 all through the spring of 2020. So kids had to get out of bed, they had to shower, they had to get dressed and whatever, and then go to school, even though it was virtual, for the school day, right? What just about every other district did was go asynchronous. So they would put the lesson online and then kids would log in whenever, right? So for instance, that's what my daughter's school did. So she would wake up, whatever, log in, do the work, that would be it. But there was no, interaction with that. We kept our kids' schedules because we knew that we needed to keep some routine and normalcy in their lives. With everything else falling apart, they knew that their school day would start at 8 o'clock every day. And it mattered. I think it really helped them to have some predictability, and structure, and reduce the stress, right? Help the impact of the unknown.
The next few years are going to be very interesting as people do the forensic on the last 3 years in terms of the impact on the students. The one thing you hear a lot about is that they've lost. There's some people doing studies and shooting and seeing that. So it's going to be interesting in terms of how pain in school and test scores and other things. Did we lose a year? Did we lose a week? What if did we lose anything? That may be the acid test. But what else is measurable? I don't know.
No, I think you're right. That's going to be a part, and it's the test has it's a single measure on a single day, right? There's so much that our kids learned through this that doesn't get measured, but I think we'll see that over time. I will say that thanks to again the whole team and Dr. Crenti and her work with the curricular team, what they did very early on was we worked through the curriculum, identified what gets spiraled back to and what were the power standards that we had to cover, and made some really good decisions early about focus on these, not as much on those, because we're going to see that again in 6 months or 8 months. So, made some of those decisions early so that it was really, again, purposefully and strategically done. And I think that's part of what we'll talk about when we see the test scores. I think that, so things were different, but I would argue, as far as lost year goes, I would certainly argue against that. Yep.
But we had an oversubscribed summer program too, and that helps.
We encourage, actually, that was a brand new program that we created. Yeah, we created a brand new summer program, and that was through some grant money. And we really reached out to families and kids and said, hey, we think this would be a great program for you. And we brought some kids in. So it was, we encouraged their participation, provide some transportation. And it was successful, and that does help. Exactly.
I think, they talked about that. You heard that from the community.
Mhm.
That was a good outreach.
Yeah. So when I showed this earlier for the Board of Education's presentation before, we saw 20s and 30s and even like 40s and 50s in the numbers around the charting our course dashboard. So as of a couple of hours ago, this is what it looks like. This is really good news. Right. And so we've talked about what you have. We did this in the beginning as well. We started it on day one, kind of following a higher ed model where they're creating dashboards so people could see what was happening. And we thought that was a good way to do it, so that anytime somebody wanted to learn, they could come and learn and wouldn't be frustrated looking for information around this. So we've kept this dashboard from the very beginning, and we're looking very good now. You know, and I think that this is when you hear about the tail of the Omicron wave, that's what we're experiencing, and we're seeing that. There's a little bit of a lagging indicator, I think, with our staffing, and so we're still working through, you know, getting our classrooms covered, but it's improving, gradually improving, and that's the significant disruption the Omicron wave can cause, right? If you can't staff your schools, you can't run them. So we've been fortunate, and people have been, you know, really going above and beyond to cover each other's classes, to keep things running for our kids. And so now we're optimistic that as long as this continues, we'll be in a very good place when we return from winter break, which is.
Did you ever, whatever happened to that pool of substitute teachers?
So we had the building subs. I think that's what you're talking, right? We had hired a certified teacher to be a sub at each of the buildings. What's happened is most of them, if not all of them, are now teaching for us due to leaves of absence. So a teacher may be out on maternity leave or something else, and those are the folks that went in and covered. And which was great because they knew the school, they knew the kids and the staff. So it was a good transition in with those folks there.
So the shortage of substitute teachers that you have now is different, right?
It is. So a shortage now is the itinerant teachers, the subs that might pick up a day here and a day there when somebody calls out sick for a single day. What we did last year, we had the building subs who could then cover, and we made that work. But now we had to use the building subs to go into the long-term leaves. So it's a little trickier. Yep. But we are encouraging people to apply to be substitute teachers, and you know, we've streamlined the process a little bit. Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, we bumped it up. Yep. I should have handed out applications when I got here too. That's right. Yeah, right. You can all be math and finance teachers. But yeah, it's you know, the pandemic continues to challenge us in different ways, but you know, I think the steps we've taken have gotten us this far, and we keep monitoring and adjusting as we need. I heard you talking when I came in before about sort of the executive orders and all of that. So we continue to work closely with, you know, with Hartford, with the Department of Public Health, with the State Department of Ed, and continue to, you know, problem solve and figure this out. You know, it's staying nimble and being able to adjust quickly has really made a big difference. And everything from ordering supplies well in advance of, you know, everybody else and getting those supplies in when everyone was scrambling to, you know, planning forward and all of those things. It's all helped. It's all mattered. So we takes a lot of time and effort, but we're staying on our toes. That's what we have to do.
Well, I think of a lot of things we worked together in the last couple of years. You and Katrina, a lot of credit for that one. I was really inspired idea that everyone remembers for those of you who jump the line on plastic, plexiglass, and everything else that built in May, I believe it was May or June.
Yeah.
June-ish, June, right?
We did. Yep.
And had it ready to go and rolling. And so it performed the weather.
That's right.
It was great leadership.
It worked. We brought in those big sheets. Yeah, we used the wood shop over at the high school. Yeah, we got in big sheets of plexi, brought them down to the wood shop, and nobody else was in the school because the kids were home, and they made them all themselves. Yeah, it worked out. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. So, you know, that's, again, excellence in all things, right? We wanted to, and when you believe like we do that the work in schools is the most important work on the planet, you know, you have to approach it that way. You know, otherwise your actions, your words and deeds don't match. You know, I do believe that educating children is the most important work on the planet. And that's the spirit that we brought to all of it, and we bring to everything that we do. So another, for instance, is our athletics program. You know, we go back to 2021 and you think of 21, 22, we think of how, again, how disrupted all of that was. We didn't have a football team. We had, there were no state tournaments and different things and all that, but we continued to work with our kids, continue to work with our programs. And, just this past fall, again, I'm sure many of you were able to come to and see the Turkey Bowl. And our football team, after a year sort of hiatus of sorts, they were able to get back on the field and compete at very high levels. And you see it across the board, whether it's in hockey and golf. And something I'm proud of here, and I'm proud of, I think, across the board, is we do well in individual competitions like golf, swimming. We also do very well in our team competitions, when folks come together. And you see that also in the visual and performing arts, where individual artist awards for our students, individual performance awards in music and in theater, but also ensemble type awards, awards for our theater, for our plays, for the work that they do together collaboratively. And again, this is something, as we think about last year, I'm incredibly proud of. We were able to offer our students experiences on the stage, experiences on the field, but experiences on the stage where most were not able to do that. Our students, they were wearing clear masks as they were speaking and singing. And, I had to get my vision checked because I couldn't even see the mask. As I'm sitting in the audience watching this, you couldn't hear it, you couldn't hear the difference, you couldn't see it. They just did it. And it was amazing. Right. And even this year, we had a couple of plays in the fall at the high school, and they put on A Midsummer Night's Dream. It takes some courage for high schoolers to do Shakespeare. Did a wonderful job. So we were able to keep this program going and growing, and especially something like VPA and theater. Like if you don't do it for a while, you've got to build that momentum back, and we never lost it with our kids. So the kids did very, very well and continue to, whether it's, again, Moana Junior, the different shows that we do, multiple shows, 5 shows a year at the high school. They do multiple shows at Saks and shows all the way down in the elementary grades. It's really an amazing program.
I see that you were increasing staff for mental health. Have you seen any adverse effects in mental health of children?
We are increasing our clinical team, our mental health staff, with grant money that we've received. In truth, it's a really tight labor market. So we've been looking for some help in that area, but we're gonna hire the right people. So we are struggling to find people to fill that. Have we had increased challenges? Yeah, we have, sure. I mean, we're all sort of collectively going through a long duration traumatic experience. And we see that the impact on kids, on families, on parents, on staff sometimes. So there are more challenges there, which I think makes this work even more important, right? That we continue to make sure that our schools are open and running, that our kids have activities and things to connect with and to do. School becomes a place where they find joy. They're academically challenged, but then they also connect in different activities, whether it's athletics, VPA, or our extracurricular activities. I think all of that speaks to a strong school community. And, so we strive to do it, to keep these things going for our kids. But yeah, we're still in a pandemic that's, when you look at the toll it's taken on across the country and across the state and locally, it's a challenge. Yeah. At the same time, again, as we mentioned before, I think that as we work through those things, students are learning in some ways and sort of growing in some ways that previous generations hadn't. And I don't want to go on a bird walk, but just to share, every year we we invite back the graduates from the year before to come to sit for a breakfast just prior to the holiday break. And so they're freshmen in college, they've got a semester under their belt. We bring them in, we meet with the board, with the administrative team, and we talk to them for about 90 minutes or so. And then they go and they talk to the whole group. I've been doing that for 11 years now. This group was by far and away sort of the wisest as they sat and talked. They had just a depth to them that you wouldn't expect a freshman in college to have. And I've got to think in part it has to do with the challenges they've faced and overcome these last few years.
Can I ask you also, as we think about masks, hopefully at some point coming down, those kids who maybe are English language learners that we have, or else any of those kids who are in special ed or language challenges or any of these other things, is there any sort of delays, or how do you have enough staffing for that to try to get them up to speed? Anything that might have was the masking and everything that prevented some of their learning?
Well, we're going to be talking about the Literacy Academy in a little bit. And I think that in part is, it's not necessarily directly related to the pandemic, but it will help students who may have had an experience similar to what you're talking about. In truth, the staff and the kids at different times masks in schools are more fluid than you might think if you're not in schools. For instance, kids are they're lowering their mask to make certain sounds with teachers, and teachers might lower their mask to do other things. Like it's a more fluid environment than they just put it on at the start of the day and take it off at the end of the day. So there's a middle ground somewhere there. But I do think the Literacy Academy we're going to talk about in a little bit will, if there are some sort of residual impacts of that, will help with that. Okay. So I'm just going to continue as we go through. And again, this is sort of what you get for your bucks. We talked about the experiences for students, right? We talked about our responses in the pandemic and beyond. We've talked about a couple of things, but we also need to spend just a moment talking about our student outcomes test-wise, right? So every year we administer the Smarter Balanced assessments to our students in grades 3 through 8. It was paused in 2020 because of the shutdown, picked it back up in 21. The Smarter Balanced focuses on English language arts and on mathematics. Our students generally do pretty well. Last year, as our students took the assessment, they again did quite well, as you see. So our students overall, when we sort of aggregate the grades 3 through 8 in language arts and math, performed at the top of our DERG, which is our demographic reference group, which is the schools that are listed here, which are typically the most competitive schools across the state. Break into that just a little bit further. We can look across each of the grades. So this is English language arts in grades 3 through 8. And this is the percentage of students meeting or exceeding achievement level. Okay. And you see that in all but one grade, we are at the top of the demographic group. And there's some pretty big differences there if you look at the numbers. Right? Again, I think this speaks to how we quickly flipped to, we were closed for a day, flipped to remote learning, engaged our kids in their schedules. Our curriculum team had made the adjustments. Folks knew what they were teaching. We didn't just sort of leave it open and say, do what you think best. There was a very strategic approach that the planning started well in advance. In January, we were planning for this. And I would text my colleagues, say, what are you doing? How are you preparing for this? And they were, for what? Oh. We had some good intel on the
So no,
Who's that?
there's just a one point in time when someone takes a different, does this kind of reflect that you didn't miss a beat in terms of the least? I mean, because the big thing is, it was a loss, but the state on track of that, and we didn't see like a drop off.
Yeah, so there's a slide and like one or two more slides forward that shows that longitudinal look. But yeah, I mean, if we look again comparatively across in the mathematics, all but one were at the top. Where we're not, it's a fractional, point. And again, there's some pretty wide swings. And some of the schools, those that are starred, especially when you get into middle school, 6, 7, 8, they were in hybrid the majority of the year. So that's yeah, I think so too. Because again, we did everything in our power to get our kids back in full time across the board. And we even brought them back in and then had to go back to hybrid at the high school because of the holiday break. We brought them in just before Thanksgiving and then had to go back to hybrid because of everything. But other schools were shutting down from Thanksgiving and went fully remote right through Martin Luther King Day, right? So that whole window of time. And we just knew we could do this better just by using the strategies. We just learned as much as we could. So again, we kept moving forward. So Amy, to your question. So this slide here shows from 2016-17, so you can get, it's the Smarter Balanced achievement over time. Again, these are the aggregated grades 3 through 8. And what you see is that we were, steadily increasing. We are above our 2016 levels, right in line with or close to the 17 level. So did we stay on that pace? Not quite, but was there a cliff? No, not at all, right? I mean, you still see that our students performed very, very well. And part of that might be that they didn't, something that spiraled, maybe they didn't get it twice. So there was, maybe a little bit of that, but that was all sort of thoughtfully and purposefully done in the planning in advance.
When would you have 22? Is this fiscal year or actual?
These kids took this in the spring of 21.
Spring of 21.
Yep.
Spring of 22 is coming.
Yeah, we'll take it then, and then we'll have it over the summer. Typically, we get it summer, fall. Yep, and then we'll represent those out to the Board of Ed in the fall, typically, October. And then, yeah, and we'll see where we go. Interestingly though, and again, for what it's worth, I don't want, there's so many rabbit holes I can go down here, but the state looks at each district, looks at a growth measure. So they look and they sort of rate you based on your growth year to year. There's so many districts that, and you saw some of the other numbers, like they are poised to have some growth based on where they were in 21. We are also, but certainly it may not be at the same rate of growth as some of the schools that had a different drop, right? Had a different result. So, we just keep plugging along. Smarter Balanced really is a Connecticut assessment because it's based on the Connecticut standards, right? So you have the Connecticut standards that inform our curriculum and our units of study, and the standards are what this Smarter Balance is based on. So it's a national test, but then it is adapted for the state. So, yep. So not quite as easily. The SAT does, and so the test that at the high school test that all students are expected to take is the SAT in the 11th grade. And so our results on the SAT this past year are also pretty strong. We look at the English language arts at 608 and our mathematics being the top of the DERG at 610. You're talking a couple of points here and there. They're pretty closely grouped, but our kids did well. You see the state average there at the bottom. We generally do perform quite well, but we also know, again, the SAT it's a single test on a single day in a single grade. And that's why back in 2014, we started identifying and looking at internal metrics so we can look for directionality over time. And that's what this next chart's about. And it's way too busy. It's a terrible slide it was a really nice slide the first couple of years, but now it's really gotten too busy. But it does show you that directionality around some of these key indicators, things like our number of AP courses, which speaks to the number of opportunities kids have to try advanced coursework, the participation in those courses, the AP scholars, different pieces like that. You'll look at the average SAT score and you'll see in 16, it was 1799, 17, it was 1231. That's because there was 3 tests added and then they removed the writing test. Just, don't want you to think we took a hit there. But our students, again, they do extremely well. They work hard. They have a great school, great program, great faculty.
Just a little question on the linkage. This is, I think it's a great page.
I'm running out of room. Yeah.
But AP participation 318 to 487. AP scholar 127 to 218 over this.
Yeah.
How did that? The number of courses went from 22 to 28. It's not a huge number of increased courses. In terms of classes, obviously it went up.
Right.
How do you ever translate that? That means it's an extra $1 million a year, make a number to have that many more classes or have that many more students. Because I don't know.
We haven't necessarily gotten that granular on that piece, but there's certainly a training piece. So for someone to teach an AP course, they have to go to pretty extensive training. So often that's 2 weeks on offsite, where they are learning from sort of AP master teachers. There's a textbook piece, right, or other resource piece that's involved. And then
that number of students running wouldn't necessarily change the net number of teachers. It's just that those teachers certified.
Often, exactly. So because what happens is they take this instead of something else they were taking. So you might see some shifts in your staffing.
Yes. So it's gone up. That's the school.
You mean overall or AP? Yeah, okay.
Well, and so what happens too, well, but those are, so when we talk about AP classes that are being offered, there might be like an AP psychology that we offer 4 sections of. And then there may also be like an AP macroeconomics that we offer 1 of. So it's not quite so clean of a, divide this by because of, and it's all driven by student interest, right? So there's an AP art, portfolio class that might only have 3 kids. And so there's not a full-time teacher that's doing that. So it is a little more varied than that. Well, depends, again, like I mentioned, the AP art portfolio class. So those students actually take AP art portfolio and say there's 3 of them in another art class. So we're not opening a new section of that. So they just work with that teacher and it's very independent. And so you don't have a section of AP art portfolio, but it's sort of a co-class. So they're with 18 other kids doing something else and they're in the room with them. It depends upon the class though. In a science room, we are a little more strict with the number of kids in there for lab reasons and things like that. In an AP Psych, if we have to go up a couple of kids to get everybody who wants the class to be able to take it, we'll do that.
But is the number that want to take the class qualified to take the class?
Well, generally that's both. I mean, there is a recommendation process that our teachers go through. So those that are teaching kids will say, this group of students, I recommend this group of students for this class, whatever that is. And if someone's not recommended and still would like to take the class, there's an appeals process where they will meet with the department chair, meet with the teacher, and often sometimes the parent will come in and they'll talk through and go through what the expectations are, and talk about maybe why they weren't recommended and what they could work on to have been, and then they'll make a decision whether or not to go into the class. So it's very thoughtfully done, and it's been very successful. It's worked well. Mm-hmm.
So would it be fair to say that even with this increase in the number of AP classes, it hasn't cost the town extra money because it's the same teachers who just have additional qualifications to teach those?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's some for the training and there may be, but we'd have to get books for and supplies for whatever other class they were taking. So it really becomes more of a training thing for folks. And that's, in the overall picture of the district budget, that's not a significant driver.
If the number of students headcount is roughly flat, this says that a higher percentage of the students are now in the running class. It's trade-off to your one.
Yep.
No, it's very good.
Yeah. Well, and in sociology, I used to go in and out of the sociology classes often. They used to talk about you can't measure motivation with individuals, with people. There's not really an accurate measure of motivation, but you can measure opportunity. So as a school district, as a school, it's our responsibility to provide as many opportunities as possible so that students can, go ahead and find their path and take those tests. So ultimately, the goal is for every student to take at least one college level course or have a college level experience prior to graduation. So we have AP, we have the early college experience courses, we have some other courses that we've articulated with colleges in a variety of ways. But the whole idea is to prepare them and have them take a college level course while they're still here with us for the support that they might need. And then, prior to going off to school. We're not at 100% yet, but we're getting there. Thank you.
Another way to look at it, but
No, please. It's important.
the table is, what do you want from us?
I know, right?
With the very high percentage of students going to college.
Yeah.
Of course, you want to get them prepared. The 487 against 4,000 is 10%, but 4,000 aren't eligible for a fee class, right?
Right.
So you're into the percentage of people that would be eligible would be juniors and seniors.
Typically, yep. It is. Yeah, that's right. Oh, much more than that, because you figure you've got about 300 in a class. Yeah. And it's really your juniors and seniors, and there are some opportunities for underclassmen to get involved, but it's mostly juniors and seniors.
The point you made, which you want to give everybody an opportunity to do it. You're more than halfway there.
Yep. Yep. It's the field of dreams approach, right? We build it and they come.
I think that far out for years, the expansion and opportunities maybe when Halifax
Right.
was amazing.
Yeah.
So, it used to be just really super limited in our core, now it's a lot more expansive.
Right, and it exactly.
They're
It's
not our core class.
no, but it is different. It was kind of It was the core. It was the core. And now we've got classes like microeconomics, macroeconomics, psychology, others that are really capturing student interest. Mhm. Oh, with 2 girls in college, they don't take the credit anymore. No, that ship sailed a while ago. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You still have to, you're still doing the 4 years for the most part. Yeah, yeah. But they still do like to see it. One of the things colleges do look for is they look at our program and they look to see the strength of a student's schedule in relation to the opportunities that are in the program. And that's one of the factors they use when they're looking at it all. Mhm. Yeah. Good stuff. So what does that mean externally? I think that important data point for us, something that we're proud to share. I'm not a big fan of ranking systems. I've been, as a former high school principal for almost a decade, I never liked them.
Well, you're number one.
But I'm about to tell you why I like this one. Yeah, well, what I do like about what I don't like about most of the others is they use a very narrow approach. And they'll tell you they use all these different metrics, but generally they use those to determine whether or not they're going to rank you. And then they rank you by 1 or 2 test scores. And that's how most of the other things work. What I like about this, it does take a more holistic approach. They use the people who put this together, they're graduates out of Carnegie Mellon, and they were creating a system to help people identify communities that they may want to move to. And so you could go, and it was really a community metric first, and then they expanded into schools. And they use things like parent feedback, student feedback, staff feedback. They look at different things. It's not just that one narrow measure. And I do believe that's why, we generally do perform well in this ranking system. And again, number 1 in Connecticut. You can see all the accolades right there. Very, very proud of the, certainly number 1 best places to teach, and number 1 best teachers. It's nice when those things line up. Mm-hmm. And then you go down into the national recognition. And when you are number 26 out of over 10,000 school districts, you're doing okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really proud of that.
National?
That's a measure. That is a measure. Yeah. And that's our C-. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if many of them, you've got some Westchester, as you go down, some of a couple of schools in Westchester around there, some out in the Illinois area. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But 26, we'll keep chipping away, but we're doing all right.
Stay awake at night.
Yeah.
I think we're all
I
right.
think we live in the top 1%.
Yeah.
Even in this town.
Yeah. So again, and this is the 22 ranking. So when we look back at the 21-22 school year and the 2021 school year, like it's the things we've been talking about, right? The investments we've made, the work we've been doing. So. Yeah. Yep. And they could, because they didn't just use that one narrow metric, as they looked at it. So. Because
that seems to be moved. I wonder if
our middle school moved up a bit to become number 1 in the state. High school generally does stay at number 2. Staples seems to have something to make it number 1. And I have a theory, but that's another conversation another time. But yeah, there's some consistency certainly across our 3 elementary schools. Again, they might shift, like one might be number 2, another one 3, and then the next year they flip, but they're all generally pretty tightly packed in the top 10. Mm-hmm. And this year, 2, 3, and 6. Right. So, yep. And, number 41 out of over 11,000 for best teachers.
And we know they're confused, if you should know.
Well, that's, that's when I brought this home. I showed it to my wife. I said, "Isn't this great?" She said, "Well, what about the other 25?" So, Chris, you guys would get along. Yeah. It's a plant. Yeah. I mentioned in the beginning about, so we've the outcomes and the excellence, but there's also the inputs. So just briefly, and I heard before mentioned the excess cost reimbursement, right? So that's twice a year as that comes through. So the state creates the net current expenditures per pupil, and this is what they base that on. As you know, the reimbursements come if we spend over a certain amount, 4.5 times, for over 4.5 times our per pupil, right? The net current expenditures per pupil. And the way that they put this number together, and this source on the bottom if you're interested, but this is right off of the chart that they're using this year to make that determination for sort of when we spend over 4.5 times the 21,898, then we're eligible for that excess cost reimbursement to a certain percentage based on the pop. So when we look at this and put it across the state and sort of just match them up, we are spending 54th statewide per pupil in the net current expenditures. And now you could say, well, what about this? What about that? And I understand. And it's a bunch of it's a board of finance that loves looking at spreadsheets and would love to get your hands into the numbers. And we could always do that, but we just had to normalize on something, right, for a point of comparison. So we figured if the state uses this to make that determination and how they're going to spend that money that they have, the excess cost, then there's some validity to it. And if you go across to the far right, you look at the Anglic rank, right, which is your adjusted net grant list per capita. And New Canaan continues to compare very well, of course, across the state in that.
What is in the net current expenditure? Debt is not.
Debt wouldn't be because of the fluctuations year to year, right? It's our operating costs, really. It's your operating costs. There's control for some things here and there. There's some in-kind, some things. In-kind is in there. So like we've got in-kind that we work with the town around certain things. That gets put in there, grants, donations, over $400,000 worth of donations different years from our PGCs and other groups. Yep. Healthcare, yep.
I
So-
think that's an important point to make, because people play with these numbers a lot, and I think when people say, oh, you really spend more per person, the whole capital side is very different, because we don't really get much state support in any of our capital.
Right.
Because, we have a local town, so we come out of pocket a lot for the capital. Other districts get a lot more state aid, and then they pick up a half their high school. So I think and it's just important to say that, because people will lots of times say, no, we spend more per student monthly. You can't compare it that way, because we have to come out of pocket for all our capital. Less wealthy areas get more support. I just think that people it's used a lot, people say it a lot, and I don't think it's fair.
Well, and I thank you, Amy. I agree, and I think the swings in debt service year to year would really make the comparisons meaningless, right? Because you can go up or down millions of dollars based on a project coming on, rolling off, how that's managed. And like you said, since our Anglic is 2, our reimbursement rate runs typically below 20%. So.
If you took 100 million over the 4,000-ish, it's 25,000, which still is in the ballpark of this, and that's everything. That's that.
Sure, that's all in.
That's all in, right? So it's like, you could look at. I agree with you. You have to have that out for all of this.
Yeah, and so you could find another chart, I'm sure, at the state level that might have something different. I figured that the excess cost is something we all know. This is a number that the state computes in order to use for a purpose. And so it's there is a value to keeping that number down, because then 4.5 times that number is less. So you may have more students that are eligible for their costs, for the high cost students. You may have more money eligible for ultimate reimbursement down the line. So. Yeah, from that excess cost grant. And then it's not 100%. It's a factor. 70 is typically where it runs. It depends on how much money, how many people are eligible and how much money they have in the grant at the time.
And what's the deflator because of the
So that is reimbursement rate on capital projects.
Oh, yes.
Right. So like the Saks project or whatever we might be doing. Yeah. So I think it's something to be proud of. I do, and it's it may fluctuate, and there's a grouping of very small schools at the top, who spend the most. But just looking at our neighbor, if we spent the 22,838 instead of 21,898, you're talking millions of dollars, per overall when you multiply that out. So it does matter, and we work to try to manage as best we can. Yeah, this is adjusted per child. Yeah, because what they do is they do the ADM, the average daily membership, and divide your total by that. Mhm. Yep. So again, data point. That's all. So how do we do it? And we've talked about these, through the years, so I won't belabor the points, but quick reminder, we look at insourcing where it makes sense. And it's really helped us. It's more work, right? Because you're bringing this in, sometimes you're adding some staff, you have to manage that, you have to, control for it, you have to quality control everything else. But in the end, it saves and it works. We do it with our printing. We in-housed our printing. That was outsourced through Xerox for years. We made the decision that we would purchase our machines and we would insource the work. We have a print center at the high school. And I do apologize for, both sides and 2 slides on each page, but there is a paper shortage in schools these days. So there is. There is. We're working on it, and Canada's not going to help. But the printing, insourcing the printing has been, beneficial for us, both again in the quality. So our teachers now can send a PDF to the print center on a day. The next day they'll get those copies printed, shrink wrapped, and delivered into their mailbox. So, because we don't want our professionals spending all their time standing at copy machines. We want them doing the work, right? Getting these things done. So it helps, in multiple ways. In our special education area, instead of outsourcing our OT or PT or BCB with lots of acronyms, right? But there's really highly specialized work that we do in-house, because we do work very hard to keep all of our students here. If we can, we want our students to be in the New Canaan Public Schools. So we insource some of the work around physical therapy, occupational therapy, behavior management, other things. It lowers costs, but it also improves those relationships. So if a family's going to be working with the same person over years, that's a much better outcome typically than if you're outsourcing this and you have different people coming and going throughout the course of the year. Well, I think that we have a really good opportunity with our launch program when we do that. I think that we're going to be able to really design it for that purpose instead of the opposite. So yeah, I think that's an exciting opportunity for launch.
Budget, does that show up?
It doesn't. So, and that's, we budgeted for where we are. We had to, and as we did it, but we anticipate some savings.
It's going to be the following year.
So there'll be no savings.
Depends on
I don't see-
timing.
I mean, we haven't budgeted for them. We're going to have to figure, we're going to have to be at 39 locus probably for the full school year, because the transitioning the students during the year would be very difficult. Unless there's an opportunity that comes up and the work's done, but we're not going to be able to get into the gridiron space until well into the summer, I don't think.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be, and there's a major
Summer of 23 or 22?
22,
Okay. So
No, we would get into it the summer of 22.
but it has to be reconfigured.
Right. So what we did was we budgeted the full amount for 39. But if we can, maybe we can move the 3rd floor. Maybe the student programs are trickier because we've got, the launch program and our alternative program, and you don't want to do that mid-year, but it's, there could be an opportunity for some savings.
So we're still looking for $1.5 million. So 100,000 would help, right? That kind of thing. So we should be looking for, it's okay to budget, the way you did is perfect, but if there's a way to chip away at that, it would be nice.
So what's
Yeah.
your
Well, and Kevin and I, and last week he asked if I could put some time aside to sit with him and talk it through, and I said, please not this week. So we're going to do that this week. We'll map it out, but my understanding is Gridiron's going to be in the space until midsummer, end of July, wherever that is. And then once that's through, so we're starting the planning now so that when that occurs, we can get in there and get it going, get it done. We can look at phasing, we could look at, again, the whole 3rd floor at Locust is office space. So we could look at something there. We want to be careful though. We can't pull all the adults out because we support those programs, right? That's one of the advantages of being co-located, is that we're there to help if anything comes up. Bill and his staff are there with special ed and others. So, but we could look at maybe, we'd have to talk with our current building owner about a phased approach and see.
So your 1-year notice, first space starts on what's your notice then?
Well, will we give him, we have not given notice.
But you will.
Yes,
And then you have a year.
yes.
Well, why don't we kick that clock started?
Or-
everything. I mean, we don't want to pay 2 rents.
Agreed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. We just have to have a place, we need a home. So there's just a balance there. We just have to work out those details. That's all. Yeah, we'll work out those details. Like Kevin and I said, let us sit down and sort of do some project planning around that.
That's a Christmas break.
It's possible.
That'd be
It's
really-
possible.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
But I would say, I mean, it's a different student you're working with in the launch program, and I think we just have to, we have to go professionals on that one, because it could be disruptive, so.
Well, and to that point, like before they come to launch, we usually spend a couple of years getting them used to going there, right? So, before they become full-time students at launch, they might go through 2 years of going there an hour a day initially and sort of getting used to, there is, it will take some time to transition the students from Locust to launch once that, to 20, once that space is ready. And the alternative program is the other program that we have, with the students there. That won't be quite as, time consuming, but still, we want to be, and you want to do the same thing, just understand the complexities of the students in the space for them. For the adults, when it's ready, throw us over there, we're good. But we need to, think that piece of it, that's all. So again, I can reach out to our current owner and see if a phased approach would work for him, because they may want to get to the 3rd floor and do some things differently, because the way it's configured now is for one organization, the whole floor, versus where it was before, where it was, maybe 3 or 4 different sort of identified spaces for, different renters. But could be an opportunity, as you're saying.
Try to make it.
Good. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know what our rent's going to be yet, so. Yeah.
That works.
$1 and a dinner. Yeah. Just a couple of other little things very quickly. Our special ed transportation program, which we've had so long, it's easy to sort of forget, but these are the white Suburbans that we have. They make a significant difference for us in our budget. They really do help to save quite a bit of money. In a conversation I just had not too long ago with a colleague, she was asking about, what do we pay for transportation for students to go outside? And I explained the program that we had, and she told me she's spending $125,000 for a single child to go to a single spot for 180 days. And so you multiply that out by how many students you're transporting, everything else. It's a significant amount of money. Our program here, again, we've got our staff, we've got our vehicles, we've got the team, and they develop relationships with kids and parents and families, and it matters, saves us money, and it's better service. And again, I don't want to forget to mention our maintenance program, right, which continues to be really an amazing savings, in that we have carpenters, we have HVAC, we have electricians, plumbers, we have, and I'm using S's, but plumber, electrician, some electricians, but one HVAC, but we have specialized folks who are doing our level 1 service. And so you see a corresponding reduction in the budget a little bit around some of the service contracts. What that does is they want, when something goes wrong, they're there, they go, they fix it. And they have a vested interest in it not breaking again, right? So they don't have to go back. Whereas if you're paying someone else to do it, the attention to detail may not be the same. We don't have painters.
We contract out for painting.
Yeah, we've talked about that a while ago. We just worried about, what does the painter do when it's not the summertime, when you can do all the painting? And
One guy cycle through all 5 schools.
but what happens is there's short windows of opportunity to do the painting when school's not in session, right? So you sort of need a team to descend and get it all done. Yeah, because we asked the same thing. Yeah. And we talked about groundskeeping, something around that, and just thought about it, but it just it wasn't enough. It is.
Yeah.
It is now. Yep. We were looking at courtyards, and the work that the PTCs often do around the schools, like at the high school, the beautification that they've done, and the new courtyards that are being really created, the new outdoor learning spaces. But they've got a plan, and the PTCs are ready to step up and support them. Mhm. Yep. Again, another, briefly, Kevin, I think I heard you mention this before, but the partnership with the town around some of the approaches that are sort of like do good, do well, right? It's environmentally friendly and budgetarily friendly as well. The shift to natural gas, and for the 5, we're looking at propane over at West. All of our buses have been running on propane now for a little while, which means that when the temperature is 5 below 0 and you have those long Arctic freezes, and our neighbors are running their diesel buses all night so they don't freeze, ours show up, turn the key, and the buses start, because propane's under pressure and it starts down to like 47 below 0 or something like that. So it's quiet, less exhaust, it saves us a little bit of money, and we believe burns cleaner. And I think the engines may even last longer, given the you don't have the same soot buildup that you do in a typical diesel. Our solar continues to. When you look at the dashboard at each of the schools, you'll see that like over at South, we've saved over 1.5 million trees so far. It goes into how many pounds of CO2 have you kept out of the environment. So it's in the school. There's a big dashboard there. The kids can see it and talk about it. It's good stuff. The cogen plants and work that we've been talking about over at Saks and in the future for the high school. Again, the lighting retrofits that we've been doing. And when you do it at home, you save a couple of bucks. You do it in 1 million square feet, you save a couple $100,000. So those kinds of things when you go to scale.
Ballpark on this page, over the last 2 years or 3 years, what's been saved?
Yeah, we could definitely add to it. I put it together 2 years ago, I think, but I can add to it.
Yeah. It's starting to stack up.
Oh, yeah.
That's cute, look at COVID, all the heat's going out the window.
Yeah. But no, I agree, because we're saving money and it's environmentally. Yeah, no, I'd be glad to. Yeah,
It's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And as you mentioned before, I mean, that's like right off the top, right? It's every year the savings that continues.
We're doing the high school this summer too.
Yeah. It's a big roof. Yeah.
It's a new roof.
And I was going to say that the move to do it all in 1 year,
Yeah.
I mean, saved so much. Imagine now in the midst of all of this disruption and everything going on with supply chain and all the labor and trying to plan for this upcoming summer. Oh, it would have been a nightmare. Yeah. Yeah. So it was really a good decision. Thank you. So we're going to get to the budget now. This has been fun. Have a good night. We're out. Yeah, yeah, right.
And as you said, it's been a while since we've done this.
It has.
Figuring out all the results. That's the return on the investment.
I think it's important. Yeah, absolutely. And you give me an opportunity to talk about our schools. This is what I'm going to do. Yeah, so thank you. But as we get into the budget, just a couple of things. We I think perform very well, as we were just talking about. We strive for excellence in all that we do, and the community expects us to do that. And I think rightfully so. We have a long track record of doing so successfully. And the budget that we're going to talk about helps us to, supports us in our efforts to continue doing that. We're looking at a couple of high leverage improvement initiatives, like the Literacy Academy, as we mentioned before. I'll get into those in a moment. Couple of spots where we said, well, let's pick our spots and really look to make a difference in children's lives and their experiences. So we'll talk about a couple of those. CERN continues to support our core work. The instructional cores that exchange what happens between the teacher, the student, the content in the classroom every day. And we have to continue to support that work through professional development, through materials, through the development of the curriculum, the assessment, and the instructional practices. There's the school start times, right? Aligning our school start times to optimize student learning and putting healthier start times in place. Safety and security remains an important focus for us, of course. Our campus monitor structure has worked very well, served us well. We're going to continue with that. And does, to some of the points that were raised already, focusing resources on the areas of greatest student need, to help our students who need it the most, to get them on track if they need it, and support them in that work. So if you have your budget books with you, I know, if you look at on page 25 of the budget book, or you could use the slide, whichever one's easier. We have a few more slides that we'll go through just to sort of make meaning of this. But as you know, school board budgets in Connecticut are broken down into 8 objects. And those objects are the sort of catch-alls for each of the individual lines that come underneath. A board's budget is well over 800 lines, but the objects help to bring some definition to that. So we look across, and we really, in these pages, and as we go through this a bit, we've talked about the disruption of COVID. The last undisrupted year from COVID is really the 18-19 year, right? Because it was 19 and then 20 in the spring of 20 that we shut down. So we put an extra column in here to get that FY19 expended as sort of a starting point. So if you sort of a place to trend from, because when you're in the midst of a pandemic that impacts your core operations the way that COVID has for the last couple of years, we needed a baseline to look at, again, and to trend from. So that's why we have that 19 expended, and then you start to see some fluctuations in different spots as a result of sort of, again, the operational hit. For instance, I mentioned before that last year we didn't have a football team in the school. So that's not only, for the students losing out on that opportunity, but that has to do, there's a significant budgetary impact to that, right? So you're not paying for the buses, the uniforms, the officials, the time, all of what it takes to run a football program, which I believe is probably the most expensive program, that we run. We wouldn't say the following year, well, we're going to cut the budget, you're not going to have a football program when we're able to have it again. So just to renormalize that, let's say it's 400,000, it has to go back into the budget to do that, which, we did last year, as we're looking at it this year. But when I talk about the impacts of the pandemic, it was those kinds of things. What programs couldn't we run for any kind of reason, and go back in. So that's where comparing against the FY 2020 or even comparing against FY 21 really doesn't, and there's information there certainly, but to really understand things, I think trending from 19 is a good way to do that too. So as we put this out, we look at we compare against projected, not budget, because we also know that things change as we go through the year. And next month, we'll be approving the budget, the Board of Finance will be, the town council take a look, and then a month later, they'll be approving it. And really, nobody knows 18, 19 months in advance all of where every dollar is going to need to go, right? So the way that the budget structure works, again, there's the 8 objects, and in our operational implementation of the budget, we might spend money within the objects, but if we ever spend money across the objects, we go to the Board of Ed for approval, formal approval through motion. If it's within the objects, we inform them regularly through our Ed Resources Committee and others, and then if it goes across object, there's an approval process that has to be followed. So that's sort of the level of sort of management and control over a Board of Ed budget. On this page and just the chart at the top, as you see, many of our objects are going down, and that has to do with the pages that we showed before about some of the steps that we're taking. Contracted services, property services. After the conversation we just had, that might come down more with 220. Equipment, supplies. So we try to sort of save everywhere that we can. The big drivers in here, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about each of them, certainly. The biggest driver is the ISF, as we've been talking about, the insurance fund, right? And we'll get to that in a moment. School start and end times, right? Which is in our purchase services, that's the transportation. We did negotiate a contract, an extension of 5 years with DATCO, our bus company, this past year. And I think we did quite well. We were at 2% per year over the next 5 years for the transportation contract, overall. That's in that number too. But you know what, we didn't, because those that had been, it's been a while. And we talked to our neighbors to see what results they're getting when they're bidding. Double digits. Yeah.
If they can get a bidder to bid on the job.
Yeah.
Bus companies are not.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I know. And that's the analysis we did. Mm-hmm. And there were, so we just did a 5-year extension.
Right now, this year for next.
This year for next. Yep. So next year will be the first year of the 5-year at 2% a year, which we thought also sort of watching inflation and seeing what's happening, 2% on a big item. Oh, no, I know. It just, yeah.
seems like forever.
It's been a while.
And it was a very well thought through decision at the time. I mean, there was a lot of good reasons to go with that. So
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure.
Yeah, we were coming out of some turmoil in the transportation when we went to DATCO. Yep, yep, it was. And so, and they really right the ship for us, right in the ship for us. They do the DATCO drivers. Yep. I mean, we work with them and, we'll do training with them, things, but they're DATCO employees. And we hire the van drivers, the special ed program.
Maybe before you leave this page, if you just compare 2019 to 2023, a couple of things I would say. Salaries are salaries. You can see the line with contract. Very explainable and understandable, I think. I don't everyone knows it's going to be about $1 million less. Skip the benefits, contracted services from 2019, right, to 2023 down, property services down. Purchase services is that about 100% for the start time cost?
It's that and the trend on the transportation contract. Yep.
Right, okay.
Yep.
And also-
But $1 million,
Probably $1 million of it.
Outplacement.
$1 million is, yep.
Yeah.
$1 million is that.
Oh, and outplacements are in there
Yeah,
too.
tuition outplacements are in that category.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it shows.
Supplies basically flat, equipment basically flat, other output.
Mhm.
So really contracts are, so excuse me, employee benefits. So the question really for everybody is at 14.6, say, 2019, 14.8, 2020, and then I appreciate you getting this COVID years. That's the one jump from 14.6 to 17.5. That's the year to year is always interesting, but over time, I mean, we've basically been spending 14 million a year with an anomaly there with this year 22, obviously, or 11.7.
And that is really a direct result of how we budgeted last year. So we have an exhibit.
I think just looking at 2019 from 2023, that jump is bridges.
It's about 8% a year.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
there's that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
really-
Yeah, so your trend on your healthcare costs and things. Yep. Yeah, but that's,
Come down in 2024.
Right, so it will, if we're funded where we need to be this year. So we're going to go through this exhibit, but that number of 17,566, it has some taxes and so forth on it, but the ISF portion of it is really 14,700. So it's being inflated because of our budgeting from last year. We'll go through it, but it's going to normalize once the budget is at a certain level that it needs to be.
I can,
The ISF, because we're catching up on funding from this current year.
I'll go through the next couple quickly and then we can take a deeper dive into that. How about that? Okay. So, these are right there in the book. I'll move through them quickly. But again, the three big drivers, I mean, you've got your ISF, you've got your healthier times, and then you've got everything else. And so how that breaks out. And then some ideas. And again, this was put together prior to our meeting yesterday morning or yesterday afternoon to talk about different ideas around sort of managing the ISF going forward. Just a couple of trend numbers looking at that FY19, and sort of trending out. All in with the ISF and everything included since 2018-19, we're looking at just under 2.9%, each year as a trend. And that's including the ISF. If you do look at just the internal services fund, you're at that 8.6. All other with that out, and including the healthier start times, you're below 2.5, you're at 2.47, since that 18-19. Again, if we just use that sort of as a base. And we had sort of targeted 2.7 just as like a target place to be. And we're about $1 million below that, when you look at the difference between 247 versus 27. So I think, again, speaks to the payoff of the efforts that we've put in. And in truth, things like the LED, the lighting retrofit, things like that are things that the Board of Finance has supported for us in capital so that we're able to do that and make those improvements. Just where it all sits, salaries and benefits, we talked about it before, that is over 80% of the budget overall. You have purchase services as the driver, given just the large number with your transportation contracts in there, your out of district placements are in there, a few big drivers, and then everything else. And again, it's not a significant portion of the overall when you look beyond, those salaries and benefits at about, I think they're 82% when I total those up. We've talked about this and just the visual of sort of the build, right? So if you start at that 281, it's sort of how, trending down, and then it's just that big jump, right at the end at the, the funding at $5.3 million in that, as we look at it. So I think this may be worth spending a minute on. Sort of why the difference in the request for funding of the internal services fund. And we're trying to think of how can we visually sort of talk through this. So if you look at the bottom, and we'll work our way up from the bottom, on the slide. We look in 2020, the funding for the ISF came from 3 different sources, right? 12.5 came from the operating budget. And then you had the 2.1 from the employee contributions and about $500,000 from your retirees. Right. And that was the funding for the internal services fund in 2020. In 21, we saved money because of the shutdown in the spring of 20, and the healthcare change. And we're able to, do some different things. Actually, that shows up in 22, doesn't it? But in 21, plan was running well also through negotiations, other things. So the operating budget deposit dropped actually from 12.5 in 20 to 10.2 in 21. So the blue bar, right? And then we still have our employee contributions and we have our retiree contributions, but here we've got about 700,000 from savings from, it's not in 2020, actually, that was from the 2019 FY because it's never easy. Our fiscal year begins in July 1, but our plan year for insurance begins on September 1. So that it's not sort of trued up until well into that next year, which is why the savings appears in the next year in the budget, right? If the money's there. So that gets us to 22, where the fund balance that we're able to use. So in 22, and this was in conversation with the Board of Finance, and as we remember in the spring, the operating budget deposit was 9.5. So we started back in 2020 at 12.5, and now we're at 9.5. And then the employee contribution, the retiree contribution, the fund balance from past savings, the 2.4 million, which really came from that COVID spring where people weren't going anymore. And then the supplemental appropriation that the BOF did in the spring to fund, for this year. So all of those things together funded the internal services fund. Now, in this request that we have now, we don't have the fund balance from past savings. We don't have the supplemental appropriation. Our employee contributions have remained consistent, as have our retiree contributions. So the difference has to be made up by the operating budget, and that's the 14.6, right? And so if you go back to 2020, we're at 12.5, and then trending forward the 3 years, we're looking at the 14.6 to fund the ISF. But that's the reason for the jump. In this year, we had 4 different funding sources that were flowing into the ISF. We had actually we had 5. We had the operating budget, we had the employees, we had the retirees, we had our fund balance, and then we had the supplemental appropriation. We don't have those things in this budget. So that's where, short of the employee contributions and retirees, the operating budget has to make up the rest.
Right, but it's the 22 budget with supplemental appropriation, that came after the fact. Right, and that was done at the end of the process. To bridge the budget.
But it was good. For this, but it was for, it was,
Yes.
so that's where Joanne broke it down in the sheet. So we can talk through that, I think will help. What happens is, so that appropriation was for this year's budget, right? For the FY22. So it doesn't exist for FY23. So we have to make that difference up when we put together our FY23 budget, because that supplemental appropriation was a one-time appropriation to pay the bills this year.
Yeah, but what he's saying, this was created, budget process, so we put back to the later point.
Right, so.
But as a supplemental appropriation.
It's nice because it shows us how it was funded, but that's not what you asked.
We asked for it
No.
in our budget appropriation.
Yeah, there was a 2.7, 2.1 billion. It wasn't appropriate. Somehow we made it and decided to postpone it or defer it.
Sure. So it was taken out of the budget, and I think it was due to taxation, right? I think, and it was, done as making all the numbers work, which makes sense, right?
But
The-
if we had not used that mechanism last year,
Mhm.
with the, just simplified, the dark blue bar, would we have added the light blue bar?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so, so we kind of put, the mechanism put you in a situation that.
Right. So instead of using the supplemental appropriation to fund this year's cost, if that instead was funded in the budget, the delta between what we're asking and what we have this year would be less by that amount. Mhm.
Plus the
Which is
use
about
of fund
4%.
balance. Yeah. Do you have this that you can put up?
I do.
Okay.
This might help.
We were just talking about that.
Hmm.
We changed the mechanism, right? We went from conservative to moderate that year as well. That
We
changed.
took $2 million out that year, not because of COVID. Because we took $2 million out.
No, the 2 million was saved the 2 years before in COVID. That was actually balanced in the ISF. That was available because of the claims pause, we want to call it that, from March to the summer when things shut down. When everything shut down, our claims stopped for the most part. And we saved that $2.2 million in that year's plan. So it would have performed, we wouldn't have saved the money if there was no pandemic. It would have performed close to what our anticipation.
Less.
Say again, I'm sorry.
We asked for $2 million less because we had funded it. for the claims.
That's right.
And so we just benefited from it.
Right, so that $2 million, right, it's a good story because we saved that money in 2020 and we were able to apply it to the cost in 22, right? And so, and that's the benefit of being self-insured. If we were fully insured, the insurance company would have saved the $2 million. We saved it, so we're able to use it. And I think that's a big win. That's why we're self-insured, just to do that.
When it happened, I remember talking about, no one's going to doctor and everything's closed down. The thought was that once it opened up again, the claims people would doctor.
Mhm.
Greater expense. But so go forward to the current year, is part of this increase just that it was deferred healthcare? It's not just on inflation, but is it more utilization by people? Is it that yellow savings?
Mhm.
moving
So-
forward to this year?
One of our challenges is with a self-insured plan is we don't want to confuse revenues and expenditures, right? Anticipated claims are one thing that we trend out. And so then that's what you're asking about, the anticipated claims. This is the funding mechanism, for those claims. And I want to make sure the expert talks more than me because she taught me everything I know. So why don't you go ahead?
Could you put this up on the
I
screen?
would be glad to.
When we came in tonight, I handed out this sheet right here for you. So when we talked yesterday, you asked that we put together an exhibit that would walk you through the current year situation, 21-22, and how that really relates to 22-23 budget. So this is my worksheet to do that for you. So what I wanted to do is just go through how we put together our budget. It starts with working with our consultant to come up with our estimated claims for the fiscal period. And incidentally, this is budget to budget. It's not budget to projected. I just went strictly last year's budget to this year's budget. And then there's other components that add to the cost of the program. Namely, we get an RX subsidy that actually reduces the cost. The employer funded, that's an auto correct. It should be HSA contribution. So we pay 50% of our employees deductible, and all other expenses are $1,729,573. So last year at budget time, this is what we presented: an expenditure estimate of $16,293,765. From there, we calculate what we anticipate from employee contributions, which was $2,191,000. And then the other piece, which you saw in the bar graph, is from our retirees, COBRA, and the Medicare Part D, and that's $425,000. So it's $2.6 million that we have to offset our expense. And in a typical year, we would ask for that balance. So last year at budget time, that balance was 13,677,710. Now that, if we had no fund balance, that would have been our ask last year. But as we've talked, we had the benefit of fund balance from the previous year, mainly due to COVID, underspending on COVID. And that was roughly $2.5 million. And that was an audited number from the 2020 audit. So that actually brought our ask down to 11,186,335. What happens in our process and what has happened in all the years that we've been coming, we actually do a recalculation on claims projections in subsequent months. Because when we put our budget together, we only have a few months of claims to actually project on because we have a September 1st plan year. And so we're actually just through November. And so in January, we do a recalculation through the end of December. And next month, we'll do the same thing. And usually it's at the town council that will make an adjustment, usually downward if we can, because we have more experience. So last year we did redo our calculation for estimated claims and we dropped it by almost $600,000. But we had to increase some other expenses, mainly because of stop loss by $86,000. So the net change to the budget in the process last year was $510,000. So that brought our ask down to $10,676,231. The Board of Finance reduced us in the process. And I think it was a lot of conversation about, let's see what happens. You know, we had a lot of money in fund balance the previous year. Let's see if that's going to carry through. And so the decision was made to reduce our budget to $8,945,809. And that's our contributions into the fund. We had a lot of conversation with the boards after that act, as you probably all remember very well, because we felt that our numbers were pretty solid. And it turns out that they are pretty solid. In fact, we are going to exceed our claims projection by $500,000 this year. And fortunately, we do have money within our operating budget through our reforecasting to fund that. And we'll do that this year. In a normal year, we probably might not. And what would happen is we would go into the reserves and pay for that over expenditure in the reserves. And in the subsequent year, we would make that up through a request through appropriations. So what I did is I put together in the 22-23 column, the same format so that you can compare. And when it comes down to the estimated claims compared to all of our other expenditures, the difference between each year is $995,000. We have a slight difference in our revenue. So the total budget increase, when you look at expenses to revenues, is almost $1 million. It's $997,988. So how did we come to $5,219,000? You know, which is what our budget increase is coming into next year. It really is a combination of the fund balance, the $2,491,375, plus the reduction in our budget, which is a total of $4,221,797. And if you look at page 93 in the budget book at some point in time and want to really look at the numbers and compare them here, you'll see how these numbers come together. And you subtract our budget ask for this coming year of $5.2 million. You know, it agrees with, you know, the calculation up on top, which is our revenue and expenditure statement. So in a normal year, if we had, you know, just went year to year, we would be asking for close to $1 million increase in internal services fund. I will say that that is really a function of having an abnormally high number of large claimants. Last year, we had 4 large claimants. We normally budget for 2 to 3. And this current year, we already have 4 with the potential of another one. So we're having 2 pretty bad years back to back. But, you know, generally speaking, if you look at claims experience over time, they are volatile from time to time, and ours, you know, may very well go back. Who knows? You know, that's been the history here, and we'll see, you know, how it goes. But last year and this year, we're not having great experience.
And of course, the insurance, stop loss insurance carrier is for the next year. But
Right.
And they've been hit pretty hard. Last year it was almost 1.4 million. This year we're already at 1.6 and probably are going to exceed 2.
And on the planning side for us, you know, our limit is 300,000. Right. So I mean, it's a big number just to have 1 or 2 additional, you know, you're going 3, 6, 900,000. You can get to $1 million with. Yeah. Yeah. So there's volatility that's introduced through that, which we control for by having the aggregate stop loss on the other side. You know, the 120% stop loss if you go, you know, above your claims that way.
Just under that number, so I mean, I know 300,000, we made that change some years ago where we went to a higher stop loss. We had like a 150 threshold or something in terms of, are you seeing larger activity in that experience in that realm too, between like the 150 and 300 as well?
Across the board, we have been experiencing higher because we bucket it in $50,000 bands. And so and that's how we monitor it. And we have the last 2 years seen, you know, higher numbers of individuals falling into those categories. But the truth of the matter is we can't write it for below 300 right now with the experience we have.
Yeah, nobody would.
You know, nobody's going to touch it. In fact, we have we bid jointly with the town, which has really worked out well for us. And the bid document reads that in no year can they increase our premium more than 50% of the prior year, which really saved us this year because all of the other bidders were up almost double of what we were paying. That they went out.
Because we're paying under $1 million to get,
we were
well,
paying
almost 2 million
800,000.
back.
Yeah.
It's not a good bet for an insurance company.
Where's the $500,000 from the reduced expense you're gonna have on the operating that you're suggesting you're gonna put into this?
Well, we have projected claims that are going to go from 13 million to 14 million. And that's what our projection is based on. You know, we know the activity that's in the claims experience right now going out to the end of the year. So on an actual basis, on a projected basis, when you look at page 93, you'll see our claims going up. So if you go to page 93, it's under district-wide, towards the end of district-wide. If you go down to expenditures, you have to net out the stop loss reimbursement. So that number is 14 million, as you can see right down there under the 22 projected. And you see up the top here, we're bumping up the contribution from the operating budget by $500,000. And we're able to do that. We have turnover this year. We have a lot of people on leave again.
I just don't see the $500,000.
So if you take a look, you know, going from the right over to, you know, the second column from the right. So you can compare the budget to the projected on revenues, that's 500.
Oh, okay.
And then you go down to
You
the
don't line item
claims.
for it, it's just, it's implied in that line, it's implied in that expense line.
Right. And then you go down to expense, you can see the offset there. I was short about 68,000. That's where, when you take a look at this sheet here, you're going to see 68,000 that I had to make up in the budget for next year. So we're short.
86.
So, but I guess another way to ask the question around
I
all
was
of
looking
this
there,
is,
okay.
well, if we, every year we have estimated expense. Forget the fund and the ins and the outs, and the others. Then we have an estimated expense. For 2017, we had a health expense, 2018, 2019, for 2021. What is it really up this year from an expense perspective? $1 million? Okay. Really, so this is-
Yeah, I think that's what this
Yeah,
page shows.
97.
Yep. Then,
So we're really talking about the rest of this is the in and out of the fund.
Yeah.
Which is 7.3.
Yeah. I mean, it's higher than
Yeah,
normally.
that's right too.
Page 93,
Mhm.
the individual stop loss reimbursement, we don't have a 0 for the, well, why is, but abuse.
We budget on a net basis. No, we budget on a net basis. So when we do the claims, when I don't do the claims projection, Joe Spurgeon, our consultant, he models out our claims at 100% gross. And then he takes 4 claimants, if that's what's in the pool, it depends on who's in the claim pool that he's looking at. And he normalizes them at 300,000. So what happens is our budget is on a net basis rather than a gross basis.
Okay, so in the prior years, you did that, you showed, so you put those, that reimbursement line, and you you would have added back in for the claims paid, right? So the projected for 22 would be 14, just over 14 million.
It is, that's what we're
So the
projecting.
difference between that and what you're asking was 536. That's about 30.
That's right. The other difference, the other piece of that difference is in the stop loss insurance. We're assuming a 50% increase in stop loss.
That's what takes you to 1,479,000.
Yeah, that's the 1.7 to the 2.2.
Is it that line? Where's that?
Oh, I'm looking at a different, I'm looking at a
It's-
different sheet. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's 1,031,000 to 1,470,000.
There you go. Yep.
And then there's little tweaks in the other expenses, but that's pretty much the story.
So your actual claims that are 1,500,000 high, right? Because you're netting out, or maybe 2 million higher because you're netting out your reinsurance, your insurance. Right? Because if you showed it as you do historically, you'd have 1 million or 1.5 million of reimbursements, but then you'd have a higher gross number. Right? If you're netting it out,
Mhm.
don't net it out.
Then it would show a higher gross claim.
So that's what you think your gross claims are going to be 16 million?
That's what he's projecting out, over 60 million. And it's based on historical claims data. So that's where at times, if you have a couple bad years, and then the good news for us in a way is that 3 of those high claimants are no longer with us. And so those folks would not be reoccurring. So you have some that reoccur, every year. But we're fortunate in that 3 of them are not going to be with us in the coming years. So.
That's trending though in the country, both in terms of life insurance and health. It's a really interesting article on that. So I don't know what's.
So, yeah, so we've got,
Yeah.
if back in actual funding, there were 10 billion actual claims today. Almost 16, that's huge. So, I mean, at some point,
Well, that's COVID. That's COVID. I mean, that was 3 months of basically going, saving 2 million plus dollars.
I think that's all, I think you have to say 10 is really 13.
yeah, that was really.
10 or 12 and a half or something. I mean, it's fair enough, it was 10, but it wasn't any other
It's just.
inflation or extra trips to the doctor. It was just expenses avoided
Yeah.
one time.
Right.
So go back to a $13 million run
So
rate.
we have
of
about
14.
13 million, which is what we've
But
always.
13 is not 16.
Yeah.
13 is not 16.
That's what they're not 16. Are we sure it's got 16? Could we budgeted for?
Again, I mean, we rely on our actuary to put the numbers together.
Well, and the aggregate stuff also, right? So we're talking about,
Well, Chris just asked
Yeah.
a really good question.
is that worth talking about?
Yeah.
Guess what? It was under the supplemental appropriation.
Right.
Right, pretty much, the differential is the 2.7 and then the.
The 1.9,
the
yeah.
appropriation, so you were pretty close last year, we just tried to fund it in a different way. And the expense is what it is, right?
Exactly.
And but we told we were one credit, we talk about Board of Ed, but this is our responsibility.
Absolutely. We've said that before.
It's just what it is.
Here's what
So it is, and we want to take care of the people who take care of our people.
What does this anticipate? What does this anticipate in terms of the fund balance at the end of this?
0. Well, the only fund balance there's going to be it's 2 components. One is the IBNR.
Yeah.
And the other one is 40% of the 20% corridor. That's it. That's how we budget every
That's not
year.
enough. What is that?
$1,070,000, I think, or $1,100,000.
On the Board of Ed side.
Correct.
It's 9.6 on the downside.
Right. So one thing we have talked about, our real exposure is what the insurance carrier writes for our risk corridor for the aggregate, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's the exposure that you have. We don't know that number until May, early June, somewhere in that time period. The town needs to know for July 1st. We don't need to know until September 1st. But, that's the number you really want to hit. So if the carrier estimates our claims to be lower than what we're estimating, then that risk corridor of 20% would be lower than what we've estimated, right? It works the other way as well. I mean, if they look at our claims on a more current basis and our experience gets worse, they could actually go higher. And one of the things we've talked about is that's the number that you really want to protect yourself against, because that's your risk. That aggregate number is your risk. So one of the things that just to think about is, do we revisit, a portion of that risk corridor when it's written? And then if a special appropriation is needed to increase or whatever, or if it's not, then we know that we have 100,000, whatever it is in that fund, because we didn't need it for that risk corridor. Because the town has basically historically budgeted zero risk in terms of the ISF. Because you hold 60% of the corridor, we hold 40. It's 100%, right? So that's just something to think about, rather than assuming that we're 100% correct.
So this might be probably a question, but why do you have a September year as opposed to June? Why don't you fix those things up?
It was with the school year when we moved over to the high deductible and the 50% of the deductible pay from the district. There was very early on, there was somebody who joined the district and got their 50% and left before the school year started. And the decision was made then to move the plan year to be September 1st so that that didn't happen again. And so another part of it, another side of the coin was, but another side of the coin, when we hire new folks, but there's another nuance to it. I know, I'm with you, but it's very, very hard to turn back. And that's so, once you make the move, it's very hard to turn it back. But another part of it was when we hired new people, right? They didn't their insurance was not starting, or there was something about, because we don't pay them until the start of the school year, right? So if we hire somebody on July 1st, they don't start getting paid until the school year begins, and they could go 2 months without coverage.
Don't they have a COBRA from the previous?
Depends if it's a brand new employee coming out of school, if it's somebody who's leaving another job in a different plan year. So I don't know all the ins and outs. I was, that was 9 years ago, I believe, at this point, 8, 9 years ago. But yeah, it's budget. Think about budgeting the way, it's a challenge. I know. Yeah. And those tend to be large months because in the summer, people have hit their deductible and they tend to be, and they have time and they're going to everything else and they're accessing care. So those can be, we want them to go in the summer. yeah. But they do, they tend to be larger months.
Yeah, they do. They're our highest.
Yeah. Oh, but it was about new employees.
Clear on the fund. The fund would end up with 2.6 million between the Board of Ed and the town. Funding the whole thing.
No, the fund would not. The town holds the 1.6 on your side.
You're
And
not
we,
spending it. In this, you're not spending it.
no,
Right, so
no.
there's 1.6 left.
On the town side, and we have $1 million in our fund.
We have 2.6 million total.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you said in the fund itself.
No. I'm sorry. In the core, in the reserve fund, it's 2.6.
So making up the IBNR and then the 20% corridor
So I guess,
combined.
maybe Chris, you were asking this question. Why wouldn't we use that volatility? We're talking about 18 months from now, right? We're talking about expenses possibly in May and June of 2023. Because that's the.
Knowing that we have $30 million behind it.
Well, I think
What's wrong with going down to zero? Knowing you have.
If you had to, you may be wrong and maybe less. That's the question.
well, the purpose of the fund though is to cover that risk, right? So what you're saying is,
If we have a general fund, we can always.
We're trying to
Well-
budget, so we're trying to have honest budget. We probably take it back.
It's because of the
it's
liability.
a liability.
You have separate balance.
I wouldn't. It's the Board
It's
of
the
Ed's
Board's
individual
of
liability for
Education's
overspending your
liability.
budget.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But we can, look, I think for tonight,
The-
we have what we have. We're just trying to get.
Yeah, and-
We have a big jump. Christine and I, we have a reserve fund, which is meant for risk, not necessarily used for other reasons. However, we're taxing everybody on a huge unknown. That's the problem. We don't know. You can guess. You can say we've been spending $1.1 million a month for 5 years.
Right, so the question is, why would we need to guess?
Yeah.
Right, well,
Yeah.
last year, I think what we decided was, well, for this amount of money, let's wait and see, because it turned out it was actually. pretty
We
good.
did, no.
Again, I think because of the phasing issue that's been identified, I think that's why, we're 18, 20 months ahead of time trying to figure out what's what.
Right, because taxes paid now are real money out of people's pocket. The insurance claim 18 months from now is, we don't know.
The projections have been pretty accurate, though.
The last 2 years they have.
They have.
When, unless you they do it all kind of on occurring as it comes in. Every year they're going to be in a situation where it will look like the healthcare plan is going through the roof. When, I'm not saying 7%, nothing, but it's not. The jump in the healthcare number is not really reflective of the real change in healthcare costs because of how we used the savings number and then we decided to do special appropriation. So the flip side is when if you don't kind of fund it on an accrual basis, then it's very hard to track year in, year out. It looks.
Yeah, but those towns that are on the state plan got a 6% or 6.5% increase. So the inflation in medical.
Did they get it down to 6?
Is it 6?
I thought
think
it
it
was
was
over
higher.
8.
Yeah, I think it may have been.
was over 8.
Their initial was, okay.
Yeah, that's in the ballpark already, yeah.
Right, and we're kind of
Sure.
close, right? And self-insured, your percentage.
Well, again, and in that number is that increasing cost of stop loss too, right? So that whole number isn't the claims.
How much of it was what?
For us here, oh, I don't know the details of that.
I'd like to know
Well,
that.
they have a giant pool, and
That's my point, yeah, but
they're
it's,
supposed to spread their risk. So.
but it's
But still,
psychiatric.
you have inflation.
I don't
You
know.
know, there's a lot of variables out there right now
Mhm.
trending, and I'd like to see, yeah. There's more to it than that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's no requirement if you're not in the state of towns to be on a par with that I.
No.
There's
No.
No.
No, the state plan itself is it's a PPO.
They group people into the plan with lower rates, and then also Griffin County has that whack.
Mhm.
with the much better.
Yeah, we don't have any of our groups in the state plan. Everybody's in our plan. They looked into it and the decision was made. And, again, that's, we run a good plan. What they want to be in. Okay.
And the HSA helps.
It does. It accrues over time. And one of the challenges with the state plan is once you go there, you're sort of stuck unless you can fund up, an ISF and everything else to go back to self-insure. It can be challenging, I know, for some districts to, and then you're resetting the base of where you begin with your negotiations with your staff. If you go back to a PPO, how do you jump right back into an HSA like what we have? Like this has been built over 3-4 consecutive negotiations with our.
Were the towns happy that did that other than this?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix. Yeah, I think that I had heard that this year's numbers were coming, they had given them a target in the beginning and that the numbers actually came in higher. Mike, mixed results from my colleagues. Yeah. And again, if we were in the state plan, we would not have saved the over $2.5 million that we saved in COVID. I mean, it's, it's challenging and it's a lot and complex, but it's a really good story. When you really think, what are we talking about? We're talking about how we spent the money we saved to bring down the budget last year. And then just, it's a good story. Yeah.
Why don't you keep powering through and then.
We're about a third of the way done. How are we holding up? I can talk fast. All right. Breakdown of the funding across each of the cost centers. We looked at the objects, just a quick snapshot. All this shows is the PAR across our 3 elementaries, Saks and the high school, and sort of, balancing of the resources across all of the cost centers that we run. Again, you see the size of the internal services fund deposit there too. But the balance is what's most important here. And we do that per pupil when we look across the elementary schools. And again, the different dimensions of our budget. I mentioned before, salary and benefits drives our budget. 82% or so of the budget is salary and benefits. And you see salary 55%, benefits at the 16. I'm sorry, this is different. This is where we spend the money on the staffing itself. So I got ahead of myself. And I think the important takeaway here is over 70% of the staffing are people who directly are working with our students every single day. All of us do, across the board as you look at it, but we've got our teachers and our teaching assistants. Teachers are the biggest group at over half, 55%. And then you get your teaching assistants at 16%. And then when you look across at some of the other spots, and a part of this is about 750 employees that we have, and all of what it takes to run a school district, each and every day for our kids. The driver, and I saw you did have an enrollment slide, budget, an enrollment slide, and my question was the kind of the ratios of all of that. I would be glad to go deeper into that if you like, to go back 10 years. But certainly the world has changed a lot in 10 years. But glad to do it. But when we look, and I think, so you said it's pretty consistent, and I think this shows across the way that it has been. In a period of declining enrollment in most towns, most suburban towns across the state, we really stayed pretty steady. When we look forward from here, it looks the same. I mean, these are the projections we had on October 1. We asked them to redo the projections. They came in just about the same. With recent data, looking at those things. Now we're anecdotally hearing about younger families that are moving in with younger than school age kids. And I know, it's awesome, exactly. And we're excited about that. And we think that's good. It's hard to measure because they call that in-migration, right? So it's really hard for a demographer to measure that. And that's why I talk to the realtors every year and they give me the inside scoop. That's what they've told me. So we'll keep an eye on it, but our projections are consistent. We have to build off of something as we do our staffing plans, and you'll see in the book, every cost center in the beginning, we have the staffing plans all laid out. It's not enough to look at a big number. You have to drill into sort of the levels and then look at it by school. So again, you see it's just consistency across the board. Here's the challenge. Kindergarten is the toughest to predict, right? And they do something called the birth to kindergarten enrollment ratio. And essentially what they'll do is they look at the number of births 5 years ago, and then look at the number of kindergartners that come in. And if you're born in Connecticut, they'll have the record of that. But if you move into town, we don't, right? It's not there, right? You don't have it. Right, exactly. Doesn't help us. So they create this ratio. And there's some towns where the ratio, the top line is below the birth line. For us, you see it's above. And like a good example here is in 2019, we're moving along at, it's about a 1.4 or so ratio, 1.4 new students per birth 5 years ago in kindergarten. And then all of a sudden it jumped up to like 1.8 that year or so or more. And then the births in 2019, and then the actual enrollment in kindergarten in 2014 to 2019. If we are right about the in-migration, we're going to start seeing that ratio changing, over time. Now we have a historical analysis that goes back 40 years. It's fascinating, and it's very consistent for a very long time. That's where that big kindergarten class took everybody by surprise when that came in. Everybody but one group, the realtors. I talked to them every year in the fall, and they told me that my projections were wrong, and they were right. So you see, it didn't quite renormalize after that, but that's the challenge in the enrollment projections all the time, that kindergarten number. Once they're in the school, there's a lot of predictability there as we go through the grades. Their transition years can be more challenging, so 4th to 5th, 8th to 9th, but we're pretty good at projecting once we get them in. But we're anticipating volatility, but we're planning for the projections that we have because that's what we have. So what we started doing, as you'll recall a few years ago, is putting in what's called an enrollment variability adjustment. Because at the elementary school, if there is some variability that we don't currently see, we need to be able to staff up and prepare for that. And so we look at our class size guidelines, we look at those grades that are right on the bubble, and then we plan for maybe 1 or 2 additional staff members that we can put wherever the need is greatest, as we go into the year. So the couple of drivers and the salary and just sort of general items. We talked about the ISF, the salary increase for general ed and our special ed staff. And there are employee groups still in negotiations. We've got a group or two that actually are a couple of years in the rears. So we've got to budget in order to sort of make them whole when those are complete. Grade progression is when teachers move, or in fact, staff moves from sort of a master's to a master's plus 30, or, they're sort of changing lanes, we call it, as they continue their professional learning. There's a bump there. We built in an anticipation of turnover savings of 150,000. So we took that off the top. Nervous about that a little bit. Last year, we had I think it was last year, was it 2020 or was it last year? Year before. We had a large, we had 14 retirements and other turnover and things. Last year, I think we had four. So this next year, we're looking at sort of how many folks are eligible. We dive into this every year pretty deeply, but the 150, our savings is about 32 to 36,000 on average for that turnover. That's in the salary line. Of course, there's other costs around training and things like that we pick
I
up.
have a question regarding that. I just passed the change in start time, and it's not as dramatic a change, right? So it's about a half hour or so, but there's shuffling going around. I know that it did impact other districts like Greenwich, that there was some more turnover because of that. Do you have any thoughts on what might happen with that, given what we're looking at here?
Yep, I think that the magnitude of the change will moderate that if there was going to be that. I think what we'll see is more interest maybe in moving from one level to another. So like we've got the 5, 6 in the later afternoon, and then with the elementaries going mid-morning, 8:30, 8:40. And so the certifications generally can run across, K-5. So we might have some of the elementary teachers who are interested in going in that later slot and vice versa. So I think we'll see some of that. But we're the #1 place to teach in Connecticut. So.
But even though you are the #1 place to Connecticut, given labor shortages and given inflation, is there any pushback in terms of people applying for jobs? I mean, because of what's being offered. And I know you hire people at many different levels.
Oh yeah. Well, the decision was voted on last night. You're talking about school start times, or just in general? Oh yeah. No, it's the pools are not nearly as deep as they used to be.
It's huge.
Oh yeah, in certain areas, yeah. I mean, I was an English teacher. I was a dime a dozen. But it's not that way anymore. It's more challenging. And it's almost, it's even more difficult in some of the specialty areas like world languages. If anyone's ever interested in being a world language teacher, punch their ticket anywhere. The math is tough. Science can be tough because of the narrow certifications that science teachers have. A science teacher can't teach physics and chem and bio as a science. They have to be certified in physics and in chem and in bio. And so that makes that more challenging. I mean, they're different disciplines in and of themselves, so it makes sense, but it's tough. We're struggling with that, like all districts are. Yep.
On the start times, you briefly mentioned the non-lab school. That sitting today, that expectation for the money that didn't get spent this year, and you're projecting it today to go into, to smooth out a little bit of the expense for next year. So you want to move it over and not lapse it. You've got that in your numbers now.
We do.
We do.
Yeah, because we had committed to this board and to the town council that if the money's approved and we don't use it for that purpose, we will not use it. Right. So that's, we thought then it's a 50% next year and then a 50% the year after to smooth that out over the two. Yeah. Okay. I should put the more exciting things up front, but here we go. Couple of initiatives that I mentioned before, sort of high leverage initiatives that we think are really going to make a difference next year and out into the future for our kids. One is we're reclassifying a position. We have a science coordinator who's K-8, and she works across the buildings and doing the science department work and all that. We're making her and transforming that position into the director of innovation. The cost is $44,000 to sort of go up into a different level, becomes a K-12 position that is coordinating our science and STEM across the board. So that would include work at the high school. And it's really an emerging approach towards science STEM education, where We talk about STEM and engagement and getting students engaged with their work, which is important and excellent. Innovation, we talk about empowerment and this idea that, you know, the student preparing for the future isn't one who knows how to solve problems only, but who knows how to identify problems, to work collaboratively, to develop potential solutions, to prototype those solutions, to apply them, to fail forward multiple times as they continue sort of to learn and to grow in that messy piece of the process, not as scripted. And so that sort of approach towards innovation, which touches across all the curriculum areas across, you know, K-12, you need somebody who's sort of driving that ship, doing that coordination across the 3 elementaries and all the way up, and articulation across. And they presented last night on our next generation science standards sort of as a foundation, but that's, you know, bang for the buck. It's a couple of dollars, but it really puts this person in the position where they'll be supervising staff, working with committees and others in the community in order to drive the vision around innovation, innovative work. And we know that at the higher ed level, this is what folks are looking for. You know, they've done some visits to different schools, and we're modeling after a lot of what they've learned there. This is a long-term sort of commitment to this work. And years ago, we did a similar thing with STEM, and now it's ready to sort of take that next step with STEM into innovation. And
Take somebody out of frontline administrator.
no, it takes a curriculum coordinator, K-8 curriculum coordinator, and flips that position into a K-12 administrative position.
Oh, that's already an administrator.
It's, we use administrative a little differently, only that there's a supervision aspect. So it goes from not a supervising role to doing all of what it was doing plus supervision, right?
There's no extension I'm doing, it's frontline teacher.
Yep. Nope, this is, it's really elevating an existing position. Yep.
I think this is great, and we're doing some focus on innovation in my workplace. I'm actually critical to those.
Oh, cool. Good, I'll hook you up with Melinda. You guys can talk a long time. This is taking, yeah, it's taking a position, the K-8 science coordinator.
It's a promotion for that person.
The person in that role, and we're going to eliminate that role, and that person will become the director of innovation. Yep. In this case here, this one individual, right? So we won't backfill with another science coordinator. She'll keep doing those tasks and pick up some others. No, well, the other 3 are a little different. So we have the Special Ed Literacy Academy, and then Teacher for the Visually Impaired. I actually have a slide on each one, so if we go there just briefly, it'll be a little bit easier without, and you can have the numbers in front if you like. But again, around innovation, and there's lots of really good information about this that, you know, we can share at another time. But it is this move from sort of focusing on students being engaged in tasks that are provided to them, to sort of empowering them to drive their own tasks and problem solving and those things. And we've learned a lot about what space is, right? Creating spaces for students to do this kind of thinking, because that matters. It's sort of to have the collaborative space, to have the prototyping space, the sampling space, and there's certainly a significant infusion of technology across the board in this, both AR and VR and, you know, other opportunities for students. She was talking even last night about how students we're starting to have the opportunity where in the past they would learn about the function of a cell, right? And you'd learn about the organelles and what they do and how it all works. Now with technology that we have through VR and AR, they can put on a headset, go inside the cell and actually turn things on and off and see how it interacts with the whole system. And so instead of reading or viewing, they can actually, they're doing and they're experiencing. And that's just tip of the iceberg around what we're able to do in classrooms now, you know, with technology and sort of bringing those, what we all used to learn to becoming experiences that they're able to have. And what a opportunity. It's amazing. So be glad to get into more detail anytime about that. In the special education area, we have 6 students with various degrees of blindness in our system. It's a relatively new experience for us. So we're looking to bring in a teacher for the visually impaired. There are lots of opportunities for a teacher like this, K-12, to work with the staff that are supporting our students that are visually impaired. They come with a different skill set than general ed teachers typically have. So there's also other opportunities to teach and to sort of coach and lead. I've been in schools before with groups of students who are visually impaired. And there's sort of reverse mainstreaming opportunities and other things that a teacher of the visually impaired will help us to do. For instance, teaching sighted students how to read Braille and things like that. So there's lots of opportunity here. And it'll help meet the need with those students and have them here in school.
Just having someone on staff also allows to provide in district something that might otherwise have to be transferred.
100%.
So it's,
Yep.
that's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, again, we call it insourcing, call it what you want, but it's really about supporting the kids that we have, right? And the families, and supporting the staff who are working to support those kids. Because it is a different skill set, I mean, you need to learn. Similarly, this.
Only three substantive account changes. You mentioned three.
Yep, so the first is the,
That's what we classified.
yep. And so the other three, right, that's the one, and then we talk about the Literacy Academy, which would be one grant funded and one budget funded. Yep. And the Literacy Academy is for our youngest learners who are identified with needs in special education around literacy. And so we've got, and Bill has the numbers, but the idea here is to work specifically and directly with our youngest students who need some help around reading fluency and comprehension and speed and those things, using a system that is the gold standard across the board, the Orton Gillingham. We have the good fortune to have somebody on staff who is an Orton Gillingham fellow, one of 100 nationally. And so sort of looking at building this academy around that individual and having her train others and train them up to be able to deliver this level of instruction in reading for our elementary kids. And we're looking at, K1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 2, but really the youngest, so that we can help them to get back on track as quickly as possible. And we really do think this is, again, high leverage, relatively low investment in that we're looking at sort of getting these students the skills they need that could impact the trajectory, not just of the rest of their schooling, but beyond. And there's a need there with our youngest elementary students, those identified with some of the reading needs. So this is a long-term. This is special ed.
It is special
Yep.
ed
Yep.
with special reading needs.
Yes. Yep. Identified through special education as having those needs. Yep.
How is
Yep.
that different than what the schools have already provided? My goodness, they got this.
So they got reading help, and they had some reading support through special education students through IEPs and others. Part of this is the specialization in the training around the Orton Gillingham and the sort of the purposeful delivery of that system with kids. And it's really goal tracking with the individual students and scheduling specifically where we're doing it now, but this is really to concentrate more of hit the needs and concentrate the support more intensely on those students, students who might be experiencing dyslexia and other things. And we've got, what were the numbers, Bill?
There are 2/3 of the elementary students have reading goals in their IEP, which equates to about 85 students. Plus or minus. And there's the Orton Gillingham method. We've been training staff in Orton Gillingham for probably a decade now. And this is an opportunity to take that already, high quality instruction and bring it to the next level in our constant pursuit of excellence. And having this OG fellow with that level of training will really enable us to provide such a high level of concentrated instruction for these kids with the goal of trying, like Brian said, getting them to a place where they're with their peers, they're progressing at the same pace and on track to achieve all the reading benchmarks and have the skills they need to succeed in the general ed curriculum as soon as possible.
So you say you have this person on staff already,
We do.
and so what happens, they again, the same person before they leave from line instruction at the front of the administrator.
So in this,
Mhm. Is that what that is?
so the person was leaving, it was right now in a reading. Bill, you want to talk about this specific?
Sure. In terms of,
Okay, let me let him.
the person who's going to be the fellow is currently in training. It's a 3-year training program with 250 hours of coursework and 600 hours of supervised practical experience. And then over the course of 3 years, when we roll this program out, it'll be, for this upcoming year, there'll be 2 teachers hired. One will work in 2 of the elementary schools, and then the other teacher that we hire will work at South School where this OG fellow is, and that OG fellow will become part-time direct instruction with kids like she's been doing, but with a focus solely on reading. And then the other part of her FTE, half of her FTE, will be starting to work with coaching, modeling, training other staff, which again, the training of staff itself, having an OG fellow in district allows us to do that training in-house, whereas historically we paid, $25,000, $30,000 a year to continually train students. This will have, staff, this will give us the opportunity to do that training in-house and have that additional.
Is this dependent on having an eligible person on staff?
It's not 100% dependent upon it. We know it's a rarity to have this person. We're already looking in terms of pipeline. And if we get into a situation where the OG fellow leaves for one reason or another, there are OG fellows in some of the private schools we can contract with while we look to fill that position. And there's also, not to get too deep into the weeds, but below the fellow, there's a certified level who could do very much the same thing. And then staff members are usually trained at the associate level here in New Canaan. So there's different levels of training through this academy, the Oregon Gillingham Academy. But it wouldn't be, we could fill a gap if we had to while we were training somebody else.
I can't find it right now, but there was a talk somewhere here detailed out the phase in over 3 years. So it is adding staff for 3 years, right? So it's part grant funded, and hopefully maybe one is grant funded again next year, but it's always adding one additional person each.
Over 3 years, right? And we've talked about, that could be accelerated or slowed down depending upon, success, where we are and how things are going. But the idea of, right, one would be budget funded this year and the other would be grant funded.
Grants for 3 years?
No, the grant is, does it sunset next year?
Next year.
Yep, sunsets next year. So 1 year, and then the next year we'd be looking to bring that position into the budget. In a 3 year.
Person that they train.
So at the end of the 3 years.
3 years, it'll be 4 additional staff members.
That's where I was going, but the grant only covers the one.
Teacher, 1 year, unless there's something with grants.
Unless they extend it.
It might be, we don't know.
Right.
Because
Because there is conversation about.
There's a sunset on the grant that we have to use it by the end of next year. Whether they extend that or not, is to be
We'll
determined at
adjust.
this point.
Mhm.
But it also gets to your point, Amy, in terms of insourcing this talent and this skill is going to help us keep students here in district.
So have we been training, have we been paying $25,000 a year for this person to be trained?
Well, no, it's
Hired
not
her as
training.
an OG fellow.
It's not training that person for $25,000 a year.
But
The
we
majority
would-
of the special ed
we would train the
teachers.
others,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
yes.
but this person was hired as an OG fellow.
No, this person went through the training while working here in district. She has gone through, it goes classroom, associate, certified fellow, and she's at the highest level now. She'll be done.
Over the
next
course
year.
of years, right?
Over the course of years, yes. It's been a multi-year process, probably 6 years of training for her.
Okay.
So just to get over, so this would be basically, the game plan is this budget, which town funds one.
Right.
Next year, we fund another person or maybe 2.
Mhm.
And then the next year, 1 or 2. So this is a commitment over time to increase the staff.
Mhm.
Is it
That's right.
increasing the staffing or is it changing a person who is supervising or teaching special ed in another discipline? Is it an overall head count?
This is increasing the staffing because this is, these individuals are providing direct services to children. Right. And, right, so they will be, we still have our reading specialists at the elementaries that are delivering direct services to children in the general ed program. And so this academy would be serving our special education students who, as Bill mentioned, the numbers and who are identified as needing that additional reading support, and with the expectation that getting them the support at that age, getting them back on track, that may, whether or not they exit special ed, but it really changes the trajectory for them going through the school. because it is, again, the systems approach to sort of identifying early, giving them support they need early, and helping them going forward from there. That's the thinking. Mhm. Okay. I think we've talked about. Yeah, and if you have them, you're welcome to send them my way. I mean, this is,
Is the bus start times, obviously, is that, and you all voted on it, you have it support, this parents, everybody was gonna go?
yep. So last night, the Board of Education made a motion and it was accepted to implement healthier start times in 2023, 22, 23 with, so at the start of the year, right, not mid-year, and it would be the 7 through 12, first tier at 8 o'clock.
You have to explain, I just want to
Yep.
make sure this is support.
It did.
We're
Yep.
budgeting for, we're financing it, we're
Yep.
gonna have the non-lap cover some of it, the rest of it, but if it's not gonna happen, or we're gonna start all that again.
You know,
It's done.
last night's motion directed me and the team internally to make this happen.
Pass the baton.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just got September 1st.
All right.
Start of the school year. Yes. Yep. Yep.
Any other questions?
Okay. You asked about the savings before, just, it's 118,000 just for the electricity alone. So again, we'll build that out over time, but there's that on the bottom there.
I think over
Oh, yeah.
5 years, you're hundreds of thousands of dollars now, so for all the initiatives.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that'll be a fun number. And then just, yeah, some summary things around the operating. I mean, this has been a very thorough conversation along the way. It's been very helpful. And I know we wanted to spend a little bit of time on capital.
I think we should go to page 95.
Yeah.
Go through the update on the requests.
And so I'm going to, I'll pull it up on the screen as well. I just have to jump to my budget book. And again, the budget book is available on our website.
Could
Go
you
right
move
through.
the table of contents and just click on
Oh,
the-
you're right. I should have. Oh,
Yeah, if you go to the table.
there we go.
Just
Yep.
go to capital, you can click on that.
I will share that for anyone.
14. There you go.
This other version.
14 is there.
Oh, did it repaginate? Good. All right, so, right, page 95, we can sort of just go location by location if you like. There is a short summary as well that comes afterwards, but why don't we just sort of take it from the top and go as much into it as you'd like. Joan, do you want to talk through some of these things?
Each year we do budget engineering services on the district level for all the projects we have within our capital budget. So 150,000 is going to support the several projects that we have for boiler replacements. You're going to see those as we go through. Energy conservation. We do plan to start looking at the CHP at the high school during the next fiscal year and getting that planned out. We are currently waiting till we have our solar put on the roof next year and the LED projects completed so we can really size it properly. And then we have 100,000 in here for 220 Elm central office relocation. So we'll have to talk about that. And it's not just any kind of engineering or reconfiguration. We're going to have a lot of movement of office equipment, student furniture, and that sort of thing. Moving down to East, and you'll see this in all of the schools.
Right.
So this is more the soft cost part of it rather than the bondable cost part of it.
Mhm.
And then just moving down, you'll see that in all the schools, we have our painting budget, which we do use and look to use each year as the principals prioritize the areas within their building. We would like to replace the boiler at East and West next year. We currently have funds for South that we're going to be doing as soon as school is out this year. Those boilers are at the end of life, past the end of life. We'll replace them with condensing boilers, small condensing boilers, which are energy efficient, which will save us on our fuel costs down the road. but they are in need of being replaced. It's rather ambitious to do all 3 schools this summer. We just completed Saks, but we feel that we can do. We had a conversation with the engineers today. We'd also like to get into floor replacement projects at the schools. They really are in desperate need. Most of them are original throughout the schools, and it's really Saks in the elementary schools. East, our estimate is that the 250 should take care of the school, but it will bring the school offline this summer for the full summer. So we're going to be, staging these in different summers because they're just so disruptive to the schools.
Can you remind us how old each one of these buildings?
Just
I
over
know
50,
Westwood
yeah.
is over 30.
Yeah, the high school's over 30, but the elementaries are over 50, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 2022.
For the I mean, there's certain
Yeah.
floors that we've replaced here and there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, occasional spaces we have, replaced as we've had to, or put carpeting or whatever, but I mean, we're talking about, if you just take a walk through, the custodians keep them nice, but they're cracked and they're broken and
Well, we're talking about even just new technology on the floors. Right?
then, we're thinking about doing new technology on the floors as well. That might.
Maybe it doesn't all have to be tile and the way that it
So
is.
that they don't have to be refinished to cut down on our custodial work and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then the fire alarm systems, we're going to start replacing as well. We're going to pair that up with the floor replacements in the schools. So you'll see this when you take a look at the 5-year. We're going to start at East. South will just be painting next summer. We have our summer programs are going to pretty much operate for the younger kids out of South this coming summer. Over at West, we're going to convert out to a propane tank for heating. We're currently on a temporary oil tank. We've replaced that tank. It's above ground, so we will do the piping and place a tank.
Yeah.
It's too expensive. And we'll save money with propane. We're pretty confident with that. It's
Yeah.
much cleaner.
Mhm.
Again, painting in the boiler replacement. We also have a chiller that's going to be replaced this summer. We have funding for that already. It was in this current year's budget. So that school is going to be very busy this summer, along with a paving project that was approved last year. Just moving over to Saks, we have to continue with our repointing projects that we've had over at Saks. The exterior brick, and we have some interior walls that have gaps in them that need to be continued to be repointed. We don't have any structural issues, don't be concerned about that. Renovating the parking lot, we're going to be working.
No,
We spent a lot of money on the schools, and boy, I tell you, we're all thanking our stars that we made the investment. So,
yeah, oh yeah. Well, and
I mean-
Saks is the largest or second largest middle school in the state. I mean, it's
There was a point where some of the brick was falling off the side of the building, so that has been taken care of.
Yep.
Again, we're going to renovate the parking lot, and it's been suggested that we look at the traffic flow when we do that. So we'll work with Tiger on all of that. The painting, as we mentioned, the refurbishment of the gym floor, and that's really just sanding it right down like we did at the high school a few years ago, completely refinishing it and repainting. We need to replace bathroom partitions in a few of the schools, or a few areas of the school. Floor replacement, we're going to start at Saks with 251 section of the building. It's probably going to be a multi-year project there. The school is massive. And then we need to upgrade the elevators. This is really, we've put this off for several years now, and we have students that need those elevators to get between floors, and it's time that we do them.
that's the electrical components, right? That's the
It's
components.
electric, yeah, we're not replacing the shaft or the carriage itself. It's just replacing the guts of it.
Mhm.
And that's a good price. We had somebody come out and price it out for us. Refurbishing the planetarium, you've heard about this for several years now. Would you like to speak to this? I believe that the person who.
How much time are you gonna give me?
Fundraiser.
Yep, and we are.
I'm probably the only one going over, but I just love it. It's so much
Yeah,
fun.
Yeah, and we are the beginning to mobilize on the fundraising side, and that's going to be coming together soon. And we are looking at for a public-private partnership. Long and short of it is, years ago when they built the high school, they had a decision to make around, do we put in a pool or a planetarium? And they said the pool's across the street at the Y. Let's put in a planetarium. They did, and The projector's been there ever since 1970 was put in. We were over at the Discovery Planetarium not too long ago, and they had just redone all of theirs. So we learned a lot from what they had, and they had a similar projector in their lobby, and they had it as sort of a, you know, a museum piece sitting there. And I said, this is great. It's a lot like ours. What year is it? They said 1976. And I said, oh, well, ours is 6 years older. So it's time. And actually, they don't service it anymore. So the timing actually, because this has been in the long-term plan, and Spitz, who's been servicing it, and it does take, you know, quarterly servicing for the mirrors. They're not going to be able to service it going forward. So to keep using the space, we do need to. Now, I do think that I know that there's some downward trends in the costs around some of these things, the technology around it. So we'll, you know, gonna keep this up. It was higher, it's coming down, and it may come down a little bit more, you know, as we look at it. And yeah, there you go. That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, it would have been a shame if we did it and then we shut down and we couldn't use it, right? So there we go. But long story short, what we have is dots on a dome. What we're looking to have is really a multidisciplinary immersive experience. And the difference, like you've got IR and VR, or AR and VR, where that's sort of an individual thing. This is a collective immersive experience, and those are different things and different opportunities. So we have this great resource, a little bit of investment into it, and it'll continue to be great. And it'll be open to K-12 and the community and everything else. I mean, I think, you know, I get very excited. How did I do? 2 minutes-ish?
Okay, auditorium lighting. So we currently have an appropriation in place for 100,000 for the auditorium lighting. Went out to bid, and the budget needs to be closer to 275. We opened the bids the other day. We are able to do one of the alternatives in-house with our electricians and save about 150,000. So now we have enough money to complete the whole job. It's super expensive, but this will help. This will make it happen for us. Again, the painting at the high school. We're going to continue with our replacement program of vehicles for the special education program. As Brian said, it is a phenomenal program. One thing to add about that is that districts all over this region were struggling to find transportation services for their kids over this year, and we didn't. We didn't have any struggle because we have our own program. I can't tell you how many schools did call me reaching out to see if we could transport their kids. And unfortunately, we don't have excess capacity, but we take care of our own kids. So that's a great thing.
And like during the shutdown, they were delivering free reduced lunch out to kids.
Yeah, they do a lot for us.
On a fleet basis. Replace so many of them each year.
Great,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, there's about a 7-year cycle, about 3 per, but it's really, you look at the mileage more than anything to make the final decision, but yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
That we keep in service.
Yep.
We do have to,
Not that size that I'm aware of. Yeah. Yeah, we buy off the state bid. What's that? What did you say? What did you say? I missed it.
Maybe we should wait.
Oh.
we actually did ask Carl Leo about this, and he said not yet, but they are working on it. So
Yeah. We do purchase them off the state bid price.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that.
We do have our maintenance vehicles are to say they're in rough shape is a huge understatement. We have to start doing one per year. We have 4. We don't have a huge fleet, but we do. They have to be roadworthy. And
we tried to repurpose the vans that we were retiring for that purpose. If you remember a few years ago, they're just not reliable. Yeah, after so many miles, so many years.
And we're asking finally for our tech lease to be bumped up by 50,000 a year, which is a 200,000 spend for us. And that's really almost directly related to the replacement of all of the interactive boards we have in the classrooms. They're about between 9 and 11 years old. They're essential instructional tools for our teachers. This is how they communicate.
Been doing this job too long. I remember doing it.
I was thinking that was.
They were the PTCs, right? It was donated by the PTCs across the board, all in like 2 or 3 years. They all came in, which was wonderful, but that means they all age out at the same time.
The cost must have come down already.
Oh, much, yeah.
Oh, quite a bit, from 5,500 to 3,000.
Because you go from the projector and the screen and the big touch board to, you know, a TV, essentially, a big touch screen.
So this is your.
This is, well, we're just, say again.
This is the, I want to make sure that this is the end.
This is
the
for,
total.
yeah.
I don't want to
This is-
disappoint you, but I think that's it.
This is the total.
We're gonna do capital at our last meeting. We'll go through all this, but.
Well, again, accelerating the high school roof.
Yeah, we're.
Yeah, right. Well, we're out of the roof cycle, right? So we've been in the roofing cycle for the last couple of years. We had to do east, we had to do west. Yeah, and the high school. So now,
So much below.
yeah, yeah.
So the roof came in
Yeah.
below 3.
Mhm.
We had almost 7 from our, what was estimated like in 2015, 16.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we were able to source all the materials before everything went south with the supply. And we got everything, we took everything on site before the end of
We
the
did.
school year. We made it work and they did an awesome job.
Well, you know, my rule is that nothing good happens after 10:30.
Well, yeah.
I like that.
I agree with
Does anybody have some quick questions? I would like to suggest this, like, well, speaking for myself anyway, great presentation. I've been too close to it. I've been involved with it on and off, so I feel like we're in a good place. We can gather up any other follow-up question.
Mhm.
We always reserve the right to have you back at some point on some follow-up. If there's some follow-ups that we can't handle with, you know, a quick call or.
Yep.
But before we, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have one question. This isn't necessarily finance related. It's more of the balancing between the 3 schools, because obviously the enrollment is much lower at West right now. And if you think about putting my realtor hat on, thinking about how the development that's happening within the downtown area and stuff, I mean, is there any sort of, I don't want to say that word. That R word, districting, but.
You know,
in terms of like, how do we
I'll make a
handle
joke.
that going forward? Because at some point, I do have an expectation that there is going to be greater demand on east and south because of this location to some of the development that's going on in our town.
Yep, yeah, and that's certainly possible. We are keeping an eye on it. It may, in the, you know, not too distant future, it may be something that we do have to do, and we would go through it. And, you know, we would follow a similar process to what we've used in the past. We would bring somebody in to guide us through that and consult with us and make some hard decisions as we have to do. But, you know, right now.
That was like 20 years ago. It wasn't pretty.
I think we should have maybe built North School. Right. Yeah. There you go. But yeah, I mean, it's our job. We've got to continue to, that's being good stewards of the district, right? So we have to keep looking at that. When we build the budgets across the elementaries, they do a per pupil look and balance the money. They're very, very thoughtful about the approach. The 3 principals spend a lot of time together. So there is a lot of parity across the board, you know, in that way. But the time will come sooner or later, and when it does, we'll be prepared.
Any other questions unrelated to the search for? So, you know, tremendous value for the money spent. I think everybody agrees on that. 85 on operating, it seems like a really strong number. And for what you're producing, the results that you went through, it was really well worth our time. We've not had that great of a discussion in a while, I think. So I think that was true.
Thank you.
Internal services, it is, I mean, the health expenses are what they are. We have to figure out.
Sure.
Yeah, that's budgeting.
That's the budget issue more than.
Consider, when it has happened since we started doing this guidance, it's worked offline before we get into what, the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah. It's true, but it's really dramatic.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
unless there are any other questions, we'll have a motion to adjourn and we'll see you all Thursday.
Oh, boy.
Now we can't wait.
Thank
So
you.
moved. Judy, second? Victor, all in favor? None? Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Kevin. Yep.